Hey now, welcome to another episode of the EXP Share podcast. My name is Matt, and with me as always is my friend Will. And today, folks, we got a good one for you. We're going to be talking about the Sao Paulo regional results. We're going to be touching into Indonesia. And of course, we're going to be doing the big one today, folks. We're going to be doing the Twilight Masquerade set review in all its glory. But before we get into all that, Will, how you doing today, my friend?
Pretty good. Haven't got enough Pokemon play in yet, but I feel like LA regionals are just barreling towards us faster than ever. So excited to get talking about Pokemon again. So yeah, how about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. We got some life stuff going on over here, but we're hanging in there. Nothing we can't work out, I can tell you that much. But a little bit like you, yeah, not enough Pokemon. I haven't been spending a lot of time on PTCGL. I placed a large order on TCG Player, which we're looking at right now, for just different bits and pieces of like a blinged out GLC deck I'm working on.
Ooh,
Those pieces have slowly been coming in, but I was looking at TCG Player last night. I have no reason to buy cards right now, which is a little weird for me.
mm.
So I'm waiting for Twilight Masquerade. We're going to buy some cards then. But for now, I am just kind of sitting
What
back and
GLC
relaxing. It's a
deck are
little
you
cringe.
are you building? What GLC are you blinging out?
Well, technically, it's two. We're doing the dragons, and we're also doing the water decks. So those things are coming together pretty nicely. But one thing I did to save a little money is like, oh, we're both playing boss's orders. I don't need two full art boss's
Yes,
orders.
yeah,
I can
yeah.
just go with one and swap them
Swap,
around.
definitely.
And then something a little more unique, like an Irida. You're never going to see Irida inside of a Garchomp deck. I'm not Garchomp, a Dragon deck. So we're doing our best to kind of save a little money that way because playing out these decks gets pretty expensive.
Especially GLC. I just walked into a random Pokemon store that happened to have some really old full art trainers. They had was it an old tag team? It's the one that allows you to draw two if you had a Pokemon knocked out, like uh, that last turn.
Teammates?
Teammates, yeah, it was teammates. And it was a really reasonable price. It was like 15, $18 or something. And I saw on TCG Player it normally goes for like 25 plus. But
Yeah.
these old, these really old cards that are just, really hard to find. They get expensive, these full art trainer cards. So oh,
Yeah.
speaking of which, I don't know, especially if you're in Dragon deck, you might have just bought it in time. But the results are coming in from Twilight Masquerade from Japan for like the league, the Tokyo League, City League events, and Dragapult is just kicking butt. So full art lances, full art lances are just selling out on TCG Player because a lance might be good. You can get three dragons from your deck, and
Huh.
I think it's completely sold out right now.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, we were going to talk more about this once we actually get into the set review, but um, you had shown me Dragapult weeks ago
Mhm.
in our text group chat. And I was like, "This is garbage. Dragon's always been the short end of the stick." And it wasn't until about maybe a week and a half ago I was like, "Wait, this is kind of good. Like, put them anywhere. You put the six damage cannons anywhere while you're doing a solid 200 damage. You're at 310 health, which is pretty beefy, and you have one retreat cost. So if you really need to move out of that active spot, you can. And then Dracoloak that go get a supporter, I think,
It's
or
basically
something.
like
Go no
it's like airmail.
airmail, right?
Yeah, it's like airmail basically. The old airmail
Yeah.
Pidgeot or Pidgeotto, I should say.
You are not kidding, my friend. The active, oh my god. So Lance was going for about two and change for
Yeah,
months. And then as of the past 5 days, it's shot up to $17,
yeah.
with most listings being closer to $25, $30. So I did pick one up when it was super cheap. I don't think I'll be buying any more of these, but I think that's pretty sick. I think that's really, I mean, as a
It's
Dragon Fiasco or Fanatic, this is really, really cool for me.
I'm very
So
excited. I
that's,
mean, Dragapult is just a cool Pokemon. I think
yeah,
this could be a
yeah.
really cool deck. And I mean, we have too much Charizard. We need something to be able to compete. And I think there is the one major problem with Dragapult, which makes it better in some ways than Charizard. It doesn't have energy acceleration, which is one detriment, at least like as an ability on its own card. Um, so that's one thing it does worse. But the one thing it does better is it has no weakness. Like Charizard, if
Hmm.
we ever get a good grass attacker, we've gotten a couple. Charizard can be taken down. No weakness on Dragapult, and it's 320 HP. That makes it pretty difficult to one hit knockout. So I think it'll be a cool deck and spreading stuff, spreading damage around. I don't think it'll even need to be played with Lost Box. I think Lost Box could be an
Mhm.
option, but I also think we got Mela to accelerate fire. We got Zatu to accelerate psychic. You could do one or both or neither. So there's a lot of options to accelerate, and it'll be cool.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about that deck. We're going to touch more on that later on today. But speaking of exciting news, right before we started recording, Will said, "Hey, have you seen this? Have you actually seen what's going on here on the Twitterverse or the Xverse, whatever it's called? Maybe not Xverse. That sounds a little weird. But Will, if you want to bring up that post there today, or I'm sorry, yesterday, it was leaked. Four terrestrial potentially legitimate cards. We don't really know what to make of this, but and I apologize for those of you who are watching. This was really hard to bring up in a clear
Yeah,
fashion, but we have a Cinderace EX terrestrial stellar thing. I would say stellar is probably the better
yeah, the
word here.
stellar type. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I played the games, but I actually didn't play the DLC, which is where they added the stellar type
Hmm.
mechanic. And basically, it's just another type that you can only have when you terrestrialize. So all these Pokemon cards say Terra on the top. You know, they all have bench barrier, like other Terra Pokemon have had, but they get this rainbow kind of border, and they have a lot of different rainbow colors all over the card. It looks really good, in my opinion, and but it doesn't actually say stellar type on the card. And I guess like in the game,
Yeah.
they actually maintain their same original typing. So you know,
Hmm.
Cinderace is still fire, Lapras is still water, Terrapagos is still colorless, and Galvantula is lightning. So they maintain their original type. They just take on this rainbow hue, and and the games it actually I think allows you to hit Terra type for weakness, or if not weakness, like more damage. I don't think they're taking that into account in the game, but they are
Hmm.
making the energy costs very expensive and a variety of types. So these are very, very expensive energy tech, very, very expensive attacks. Some of them are really powerful, like as we'll go into. Some of them maybe not so much, but maybe it hints that alongside this, we'll get an energy acceleration mechanic to help. Otherwise, like we were talking about before the cast, the only decks that I feel like could make good use of this is Lost Box at this point. Um, Anyway, do you have any specific notes about how the cards look before we kind of delve into, you know, what these specific leaked cards say? Oh,
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've. Oh, what was that?
sorry, I just before we delve into this, none of this is
Yeah, yeah.
confirmed. This is I just want to make sure everyone
Mhm.
knows that this is just stuff on the internet. This could be completely Photoshop made up. This could be, you know, so we're speculating. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but I just think it's really interesting. You know, it shows what could be the future of our TCG. But just yeah, warnings. You know, warning. This is potentially
Yeah.
fake.
No, that's a good idea. Good
Yeah.
disclaimer there for sure. One, I think the design of the cards looks pretty good if they are legit, and I'm not really a big fan of the big hat crystal thing, like the whole terrestrializing thing. I think the mechanic is cool, but I don't think it's like an appealing concept to me. Like, oh, we're gonna turn to crystal, and we have funny hats, and now we have a mini colored hat. Like, I don't know if I really like that whole deal, but I've kind of felt like ever since the Scarlet and Violet block came out and we got rid of the V's and stuff like that, the standard print of a lot of these EXs look pretty good. I
Hmm.
I I don't know about how you feel, but I feel like the V's were not bad. They weren't terrible, but they weren't great. The standard prints look just as good as some of these full arts. In fact, I would say some of the full arts look really, really bad because you just get this weird effect with the art and the borders,
Hmm.
and sometimes they're just like the solid color. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan, but these standard prints look really good. So hopefully the full arts look a little bit better. If there's any alt arts or secret illustrations rares as they're called nowadays, maybe those will look good as well. But um, like you said, we have some really crazy attack costs, and we don't want to spend too much time on this because again, we might just be talking about something that I just totally made up. This could be totally fake, but we were both looking at the Lapras CX almost right away. For those of you folks who are listening at home and not really watching what we're doing here, Lapras CX, basic Pokemon, 220 health, a stellar Pokemon. The attack that we really want to touch on here is for a water energy, a psychic energy, and a steel energy. So three different energies. Laramir Rain. Look at the top 20 cards of your deck and attach any number of energy cards you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. No damage, but I mean, maybe this is what you play. Well, maybe this is the big energy accelerator to get all your energy everywhere else. But I don't know, man. I don't know what to make of this.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, you could use this to accelerate, but you still initially have to pay three different energy costs on the Lapras in order to accelerate. So that would take either three different turn attachments and drawing into the right energy types. Like, I don't know how you would even get the attack off in the first place, but it is very interesting.
It is. And I think for that much energy acceleration, you might be able to get away with maybe like one legacy energy, which we'll talk about later on today.
Hmm.
And then maybe you can Earth and Vessel for the other two energies. I don't really know how that's going to work, but it got me thinking about another A spec that was released, and I just want to go take a look at that. That's the Neo Upper Energy.
Hmm.
As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon for its colorless energy, if it's attached to stage 2. So
Yes.
there is a spec that can kind of help with this. It says provide of any 2 energy. It only goes to stage 2 Pokemon, but are you really going to play that as your A spec over something like Prime Catch or Maximum Bell or some of the really cool A specs we're going to talk about today? I don't really know, but regardless, it's a really interesting concept. If the only thing that can play it is indeed going to be Lost Box, these cards are not going to see any play. Someone's going to try to shove one of them to a deck. It's not going to work out, but the energy costs are just too insane. And as we remember, we were talking about this a little bit earlier before we started recording. Not Radiant Pokemon. Remind me what those amazing rares.
Yes,
The
it did.
amazing rare
Yes.
Pokemon had crazy energy costs, and they saw zero play up until when Lugia Archeops came out, and we did have those special energy that allowed you to kind of fulfill some of these insane energy costs. So, if that's going to be the case here, these might be nothing better than binder fodder, which I really hope isn't the case. But if we do get some energy acceleration, as you kind of hinted towards, fingers crossed, and if these are even legit, they might see some really crazy games in the future.
I mean, even though, I mean, we can delve more into specific attacks, these are really cool. They're expensive, but even if we get energy acceleration, I'm just trying to, figure out which one of these attacks might be, meta level powerful, like might be able to keep up with the Charizards and the Dragapults. And, that Lapras is really powerful. You could set up your entire board in one go, have everyone able, powered up with their energy costs. So that is relatively powerful if you can get the Lapras set up. But the other cards, Flare Strike 280, that's a good number to hit. Hits V stars, but it's relatively expensive. Two colorless and a fire. Garnet Volleys 180 snipe anywhere on the bench for three energies of different types. I think is very very expensive for an attack that's not particularly powerful. We have
Oh,
Trap.
actually, you know what though?
Hmm.
Sorry to cut you off there, but that Cinderace that you were just touching on, that Infernape that's coming out says attach a fire or fighting energy once turn
Oh,
your turn. So that could potentially work. I mean, it's only one, but I think if you have multiple Infernape, you could probably set that up pretty quickly. I
mhm.
don't know. It's just an idea. A magma basin could potentially be a thing there. There's ways to make it work, but it is going to be extremely demanding to try to get these things powered up. But you were
multiple
going to jump on
stage
Terrapagos.
multiple
Yeah.
stage twos
Yeah.
if as well if you get that
Hmm.
Infernape in play. But so Terrapagos, I actually think this first attack is pretty good if it didn't have this the text underneath, which is if you go second, you can't use this attack during your first turn. So, if you have double turbo energies in your deck, you might be able to use this. If you set up a full bench, you could potentially get 150 or minus 20, 130 off turn one, going second. But you can't use this attack going second. So, best case scenario, you go first and you're able to use it turn two, still for around 130 max. Um, or if you attach twice, I guess because you went first, you can do it for the full 150. But um, it's okay. And its second attack is also just 180, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage from basic non-colorless Pokemon. So we have Noivern EX, who doesn't get a lot of play. It prevents damage from all basic Pokemon, not just non-colorless. And this attack costs three different energy, rather than double colorless, I think, for Noivern. And then we have finally Galvantula. It does 110 or 220 to a V or EX. It does 100, it does 110 more damage to Vs and EXs. So 220, and then 180, and discard all energy from this. It's basically item lock on your opponent's next turn. So all very expensive, all not necessarily completely broken. I feel like when attacks are usually this expensive and have a variety of energies, they tend to be really powerful. I don't know if the power level balances out with the cost here. So cards look really cool. I feel like these are probably real. My instinct, my gut feeling is telling me they're probably real, but it doesn't seem like they might be meta defining or meta breaking in any way.
Yeah, I mean, even like the terminology that these attacks are using are pretty standard for most Pokemon cards. They look legit. There's no typos. The font looks correct. As you mentioned before, the attacks, although maybe a bit insane with the energy cost, are fairly balanced. Um, I hope they're real because this is a really cool concept. Maybe they create some kind of tool that when you attach it to a terrestrial Pokemon or a stellar terrestrial Pokemon, whatever these things are going to be called, maybe those energies just kind of turn into whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some kind of mechanic that maybe they can develop to make this work. But again, if this really is the energy cost and it's all we can really do is just accelerate by hand, or maybe occasionally with an ability or maybe some kind of item card or a supporter, it's going to be difficult to make this work consistently. That's the thing here. I think with Lara Moraine on the Lapras, you could potentially set up all your Lapras that way because the first attack actually isn't bad. This attack does 40 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. So if out of those 20 cards and maybe you found 10 and you're just kind of slapping them across your Lapras, that might work. That might work. You're doing some decent damage. You don't have a ton of health. You might get knocked out pretty quickly. Still isn't like a super effective typing I have to worry about right now. But I don't know. These are really interesting, Will. I'm not sure what to make of it. I hope they're legit, but at the same time, if they're not, it would not be the end of the world. I wouldn't be super disappointed.
No, but um, I mean, the one thing we were mentioning it when we were talking off camera before we started. One thing is none of these cards actually say Stellar type anywhere on the cards.
Mm-hmm.
They do say Terra, like previous Terra Pokemon, but they don't say Stellar. So they wanted to introduce a mechanic that was unique to Stellar Pokemon, like a card that said Accelerate to any of your Stellar Pokemon. I don't think that would be possible because there's nowhere on the card that like identifies this necessarily
Mm,
as a
yeah.
Stellar. So it would have to be to a Terra Pokemon, and that would apply to all of our previous, Terra Pokemon as well, or something. So because they don't identify themselves, there couldn't be a unique mechanic that would be too specifically accelerated just to Stellar.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know what? I think these are legit. Looking at how off center they are, that seems to keep up with US printing standards. So I think that's probably legit. I'm just poking fun. I'm just joking. Well, anyway, that's some exciting news. If it's a leak and it's legit, then hey, you heard it here first on the XP Share podcast. And if they're not real, well, disregard everything we just said. So anyway, that being said, we got some other stuff to get into today. The first one, of course, being the Sao Paulo regional results. I know this took place about a week ago at this point, but it's still good to review it. Big surprise, Charizard Pidgeot took the whole thing. This is, again, a reminiscent build off of Tord's list. The main difference here, I would say, is the Hero's Cape is getting, I'm sorry, Hero's Cape is replacing Prime Catcher, and we also have excuse me, a couple different Charmanders here, so it's a slight difference here. But otherwise, it's about the same. I would say this deck is probably built a little bit more for the mirror match with the TMD evolutions, the Hero's Cape obviously being an addition there, and we also see the return of Mist Energy, which of course is mainly going to be concerned with things like Aurora Moon X or things of that nature, maybe even a Sableye. Otherwise, though, again, nothing really super exciting here. But Charizard proven again that it works, it wins, and if you want to go to a tournament and do well, this is the deck list you want to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mist Energy is actually, I've seen this tech used in a lot of Charizards more recently because, I mean, this deck now seems to be a tier zero deck. Charizard's
Mm-hmm.
just that deck. Mist Energy not only is good for um, Roaring Moon EX, it is also good for the mirror, where I feel like a lot of Charizards are now teching in TM Devo because it is sort of a win button. If
Mm.
they've used all their rare candies, you know that you can get rid of a Charizard, get rid of a Pidgeot, and then they have no options to continue the game. If you attach a Mist Energy, it also prevents a Pokemon from being devolved. So you can evolve up a Charizard through Charmeleon. You can attach a Mist Energy to your Pidgeot, and your board is basically unable to be sort of devolved
Hmm.
and prevents you from that game plan really working. So just the one of Miss Energy is able to work in a bunch of different scenarios in the mirror and in Roaring Moon EX, and I guess Sableye too. But I don't know if Lost Box is really um, doing that well right now.
Yeah, I mean, Lost Box definitely has fallen off, and we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it today because the results aren't really there. It's not really worth talking about this time. Don't discredit; it's still a good deck. Don't forget about it. But that's a really cool tech. I had not even thought of that. Mist Energy protects you from TMD evolution. That's really really cool. Um, I was playing two TMD evolution months ago, thinking, "Oh, this is a cool tech. It's spicy. No one's ever going to see it coming," and it won me a game here and there. But more often than I found two is kind of a waste of space. We already know that Charizard has that flexibility that allows it to kind of have, 70 different cards instead of 60 different cards that you can throw in the deck. We talked about that some time ago, but regardless, that's pretty cool. And I haven't really updated my Charizard deck in quite some time. I've been so focused on building Ancient Box to where I want it to be. Charizard's kind of fallen off, which BDIF, we already know that. Maybe I should put more time into it, but that Mist Energy is pretty sick, man. I actually really like that mindset and how that's going to work. That's really cool.
And I do think the cape also Ancient Box. Basically, like if you were playing Ancient Box against a Charizard that had plays cape,
Yeah.
game over. Just scoop it up. It's over. Go next. I don't think.
I played one Lost Vacuum for that exact reason. Because I'm not really afraid of any other items, right? Like Maximum Belt, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect me. Choice
Yeah,
belts and things of that nature don't really care. But that
yeah,
Hero's Cape, that's game over instantly. So yeah,
yeah.
that's
A
scary
430.
deck
Yeah,
for
you got
sure.
a three-hit KO or Charizard. Game over. Yeah, especially with a
Wow.
Toro plus a cape. You
Mm-hmm.
Toro one Charizard, you cape the next Charizard. Done.
Game over.
So,
Yeah, game over at that point. Well, with
you,
that being said, I know we had just touched on Lost Box there. We said we were going to talk about it too much, and we're not, but we do have one list to talk about. Lost Zone Box came in second place over in Sao Paulo. This is very much a toolbox. You got a Roaring Moon, you got a Hoopa EX, you got a Raikou V, you got an Iron Hands EX. You have a bunch of different pieces moving here. We have four different kinds of energy. I think the really interesting about this list, well, the really interesting thing about this one, no Jet Energy. We're just relying on a rescue board, some switch carts, and some switches. But on the energy side of things, it's actually pretty thin for your typical Lost Box build.
yeah, I mean, I do think that this specific, this is not the first time I've seen a build similar to this popping up. I think people call it Paradox Box now because it incorporates a lot of
Mm.
the new cards since Paradox Rift. Of course, Iron Hands, just any deck that can make Iron Hands work, they're always going to try to squeeze in Iron Hands, get those extra energies. I mean, those extra prizes. But we talked about this last time, I think, on the podcast. I don't really understand the Raikou V. I guess it's just a quick early game attacker. You could even attach from hand and just get good amount of damage relatively early, but you're also putting a two prizer out there and potentially giving up two prizes. So, it's a little bit of a give and take. You got your Roaring Moon for just unlimited damage potential, one hit knockouts. You got your Hoopa EX, I guess is also good for against Iron Hands because you have the fighting
Mhm.
weakness. It's also good just Energy Crush is just good against decks that attach tons and tons of energy, maybe like Lugia or I don't really know what other decks attach a ton of other energies, but um, pretty straightforward, I think, relatively mainstream way for Lost Box to be playing itself now, and it got the results, so can't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
can't really fault it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, took second place in Sao Paulo, a fairly large regional event, so nothing to scoff at there. Yeah, I'm with you. The right code thing, I don't fully understand it. Maybe someone smarter than us who's a little more attached to the meta might be able to explain it, but I don't see the value in it personally. I mean, being able to attack for two energy, I guess, is fairly efficient, but with things like Cramorant in the deck, you can probably just sprinkle in some damage a little more easily without sacrificing the second prize. I mean,
It's
it
extra
got second place, so
it's extra draw. I mean, you can put
yeah,
a
yeah.
rescue board on it, I guess, but you have your Compies, you have so many ways to draw. You have your Colossuses, um, but it doesn't play. Oh no, it does. It does. It plays one Pokegear, I guess, if you really need to stretch for that Colress. I guess just more draw is always good. You even have a Mew in there for probably more draw. I
Hmm.
don't know if you're attacking with the Mew too often. Um, maybe in the Tina, against Tina for the one hit knockout. But um, other than that, yeah, I'm not a Lost Box head. It's too sweaty for me. I don't know all the ins and outs of this deck.
Yeah, the Iron Bundle's a pretty cool ad there as well. It's basically like a built-in escape rope, but I don't know. That Raikou is the one thing that really throws me off. But again, someone have to explain it to us who's much smarter. That being said, we got one more deck we want to get through for Sao Paulo, and that's going to be the 20th place Espathra Zatu deck. Um, this thing I would say is more anti-meta than anything else. We're talking about things like Iron Hands. We're talking
Hmm.
about things like Ancient Box, Roaring Moon, Chen Pao. Um, what other
Yeah, I mean,
basic
those
attackers are there in the
decks I
format?
feel
Those
like
are
are the
big ones,
ones.
right?
I mean, Charizard's always number one. I think Shenpao is usually top three-ish, and Roaring Moon
Hmm.
is also climbing the ranks slowly. So this deck really messes up. Item lock basically completely kills Shenpao, and then because you're a grass attacker, and I mean, I feel like Espathra was basically printed to kill Charizard, kills Charizard, and also in so doing also kills Roaring Moon. So I hate this deck. Anytime I come across this deck on the ladder,
Hmm.
I scoop. It's so annoying. It's almost more, no, not more annoying than control, but like almost as bad as control. So,
It's getting there. Yeah, yeah.
but I mean, I like to see decks that are kind of rogue succeeding, and it's cool that decks that aren't just the super sweaty Charizards, Lost Boxes, and Tinas and stuff getting results. So I can't complain about that.
Yeah, and for those of you folks who aren't familiar with the Spathra EX, all it really does is just add an extra energy cost to basic Pokemon. So that in tandem with Pokemon League headquarters, which is a stadium that does the same exact thing, you're potentially looking at, say, like, we'll just take a Roaring Moon from the Ancient Box, the baby Roaring Moon. That already needs two energy to attack two dark energy. The Spathra, that's another energy. And then when you have Pokemon League headquarters, that's four. So we're looking at four energies needed to use one attack that used to cost you two. You can understand why that would be really, really annoying to play against. And on top of that, being able to accelerate that, I'm sorry, not accelerate, being able to item lock your opponent with Banette EX, that's a tough combo to get around. I do think Espathra is doing better. I think it's starting to kind of climb up in the ranks. We're seeing down there at the bottom left for those of you folks who are watching, 114th place in Sao Paulo. We have one in 73, 40, and 20. But if you were to look at other lists that include a SPAT 3X from different regionals around the world, you will see this deck is actually slowly climbing those ranks. It's starting to get closer to that top, say, 16 as an example. So keep an eye out. I don't think Espathra is going anywhere anytime soon. Basic attackers are starting to become more relevant. So something to keep an eye out for. I think Espathra might have a little bit of legitimacy in its veins.
Definitely.
But we shall see. Speaking of basic decks, we're going to go ahead and move on to another regional that's going to be taking place over in Indonesia. 143 Masters, not a ton, but we do have some pretty cool results to show you. So coming in first place, Christian with an Ancient Box deck. Nothing super crazy in the list, admittedly. I think Will and I are more excited the deck just continues to do well. That's why we want to talk about it very quickly. But as you can see here on screen, very streamlined, very straightforward. Four Roaring Moon, four Koraidon, four Fluttermane, and a Greninja, and then all the typical culprits that you would see: your Professor Sadas, your Explorer Guidances, your Awakening Drums. Nothing really too spicy in this deck, honestly. Will
Is there anything? I mean, like, how does your list compare? Is it just essentially exactly the same, or just a number, like one or two cards that are different?
um, two less Poke Gear, two
Hmm.
less Ultra Ball, one less Counter Catcher, no Energy Retrieval. I think I played TM Devo in place of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the TM Devo has won me some games against Charizard, Goldango, other decks. So this is not a bad list, and obviously it took first place, so it's got to be halfway decent. But there's
With all
some
that
small
extra
differences.
space, if you're playing less Ultra Ball and Gear, like what are you playing instead?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm looking at the list now. I play a copy of bosses. I know that.
Hmm.
I think I went down actually down to two fighting energy, so that looks okay there. Let's see, what are the major differences here? Man, I should know this. That deck list, I've been playing with it for quite some time now. The TM Devo's in there.
The Devo, you
You
play a
have
boss, only
the
one
two
boss or two boss?
one boss, two counter catcher.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know.
Are you
It might
playing
be the
any
same. Like,
other ancient
uh,
Pokemon? or you just play the three?
No, no, nothing like that. I think it might be like the same makeup, but it might just be different counts. I think that's probably what's going on here. But then again, I'm not playing like four pal pads or anything like that. I don't know. You got me curious. I'll have to look it up after we record today, see what the major differences are here. TM
Okay.
Devo and some other stuff. I don't know. But regardless, this took first place over in Indonesia. Solid deck. But we got some bigger things to move on to, so we're going to try to get through this one fairly quickly. Guardy took second place. Tito Santoso took Guardy to second place over in Indonesia. Again, nothing super crazy to point out. I will say the Morty's Conviction is a little different.
Oh,
To be
that's
honest, I don't
interesting.
really know what that card does, to be honest. But
It's
regardless, they have it in the list. I can look it up.
Yeah, it's just draw based on the number of benched Pokemon. It's kind of like there was
Oh,
a
yeah,
card
yeah,
that just rotated that was very similar to it, and I don't remember what it's called. Like,
yeah.
but yeah. Um, so like essentially draw six or something like that. Draw for each of your
Yeah, you can
opponent's
always
best Pokemon.
just
Oh, discard one
discard
and
another
draw
card from your
five.
hand. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean this
Interesting.
seems pretty prototypical Guardy list, at least what they're playing right now. So it's good that
Yeah.
Gardevoir is getting some results because I think it's a pretty cool deck.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Guardy was completely done after regionals. I mean, sorry, after rotation, but here it is, taking second place in a might be not a huge regional, but there are folks who are there. There's some skilled players over in Indonesia, so
Mm.
nothing to scoff at. In third place, we have something we've seen time and time again. Here's Arc Vulpix. I'm so used to saying Arctina. It's such like the go-to thing, but Arceus Vulpix. Again, nothing super crazy to look at here. You have the maximum belt that allows your Arceus V star to go take some early knockouts on some smaller EX Pokemon such as Aurora Moon or Chimpao. You have a 2-2 line of the Vulpix. And again, I wouldn't really say anything super spicy. Sharon's Care is in there. You have an Eerie. But again, Will, nothing too crazy to look at here, I wouldn't say.
No, and this has sort of become, at least in the new meta, a pretty decent choice, because there's just so many decks that rely on attackers that have abilities. Like we said, the main
Mm-hmm.
big decks right now are Pao, Charizard. They all have abilities on their attackers. So you just hit the right Charizards, and they don't, basically don't tech for this matchup, and it's an auto win because if they're not playing you know, a raging fire or an Entei or something like. Oh no, Entei has an
Mm-hmm.
ability too. So if you're not
Oh
playing like a
yeah, yeah.
raging fire or something like that, you're kind of just out of luck.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably going to be strictly like an anti-Charizard meta thing, but I mean, it took third place, and Charizard actually was not even. It was in the top five, and you see some more down there, 7, 8, 9. But otherwise, Charizard still very relevant, but did not take first place here. One of the things we want to touch on before we move on to what we're really here for, and that's going to be the Twilight Masquerade set review. This is going to be the sixth place. Goldango coming back, making
Yeah,
making some waves again. Um, Nothing super crazy. Once again, a pretty standard deck list, I would say, for Goldango nowadays. You do have the Cypher Maniacs Crypto something of another. I don't remember
Cryptomaniacs
exactly.
deciphering or no code
Oh,
breaking.
did I get that mixed
Cryptomaniacs
up?
code
Code
breaking.
breaking.
Code breaking. Yeah,
But again, nothing super crazy here. Pretty standard build for nowadays in Goldango. Prime Catcher being the cool addition after the set got released, but again, nothing crazy.
but you have this deck built. I feel like you should give it another shot because I do think post rotation's given this deck another life. There's no more what's it called? Path to the Peak. So,
Yeah,
that was the main card really preventing this card from popping off. And I think, you know,
right.
I think it can hang with the meta right now.
I haven't picked it up in quite some time. It's still built, it's still there. I haven't even unboxed it in quite some time. So it's just all kind of hanging out. I've been too focused on Ancient Box, and I think Dragon Ball EX is probably going to take my attention once we have the new set come out. That being said, here we are, the meat and potatoes of today's conversation. Twilight Masquerade. We're going to do the full-on set review. For the sake of time, we are going to be skipping some cards. If those of you at home want to follow along, justinbasil.com/translations/SB6 is your link. And we got some good cards to review today. So let's go ahead and jump into it, Will, without wasting any time. We're going to skip over quite a bit of this. If anything's relevant to GLC, aside from the standard, we go ahead and touch on that. But I think a lot of these first few cards in the grass section, nothing really super exciting, right?
Ariados is interesting. I don't know if it actually whether it's standard or GLC, it's kind of like basically like a Spite Ops, but a Spite Ops on a non-rule box
Hmm.
Pokemon. So it makes your opponent's active Pokemon have a retreat cost of one more, and then its attack also is dependent on your opponent's active or your opponent your active your opponent's active retreat cost. So as you put more Ariados out and the retreat cost goes higher and higher, its attack gets higher and higher. So I think if you only have like two Ariados out, well, let's do the math here. It does 10 plus 30 for each retreat cost in your opponent's active Pokemon. So if your Charizard naturally has two, if you
Hmm.
add two more, what is that? That's 60 more, 30, 60, 90, 120. 120 plus 10 is 130. Still not enough to one hit KO a Charizard. I
Yeah.
think you'd need to have three out, so that would be 90 plus 60, 150, 160. Nope, three out still doesn't do it. That's 320 damage. So you have a full bench of Ariados to actually take down a Charizard. I'm
Maximum bell.
sorry. Oh yeah, maximum bound. I'm sorry.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Maybe in GLC, if anyone's trying to make a tricky, grass deck that just kind of stalls and stuff like that, maybe this could help. But I just thought it was kind of an interesting card.
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the cards that we can definitely touch on here next is actually going to be the Sunflora, which you have to think is just it's a print to go ahead and counter Charizard and its dominance. Sunflora stage one Pokemon, 100 health. The first attack is all we're really interested in here for one color, or for I'm sorry, for one grass energy, 60 times. This attack does 60 damage for each fire energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So again, this is clearly a printed counter to Charizard. If you think about Charizard being able to accelerate energy very freely, most lists are going to be playing six. Hypothetically, let's just say they have four. That's 240 damage. Double that up with the weakness, and you're taking one hit knockout on Charizard. That being said, this is useless in pretty much every other scenario. Probably not going to see a ton of play. You might get like a 1-1 line of the Sunflora Sunkern in some lists, but
They could also
right? I
play
mean,
around it. I mean, they could just not accelerate extra energies, only accelerate two. If you only
mhm.
accelerate two just to the Charizard that you need, it's not enough damage. 120 times two is 240. So, the second you put down a Sunkern, Charizard knows, hey, don't accelerate extra energies. It can accelerate one to the active to help retreat it, and then put up the Charizard that only has two, make sure there's no extra fire on the bench, and sort of play around it. So, um, I think it's one of those cards that they clearly print to be a Charizard counter, but also one that's not really difficult to play around, and so it will never actually get any real meta play.
Yeah, I mean, if this had been like on a basic Pokemon, just on a Heracross, just as an example, and it still had that one energy cost, this is a one of in a lot of decks, I would have to argue. But being a stage one Pokemon, you need to evolve it. I mean, maybe you can get away with like Salvatore, which lets you evolve same turn or something along those lines, and then you can
Hmm.
touch energy and then switch and attack. That might be something. I also think this card will probably see more play. Will be more successful in Japan, where they play a one of format, whereas we play best of three. Game one, if you see this, you're aware. You're already keeping an eye out for it. But in a best of one, you might be able to, kind of get away with this silly little mechanic. So something to keep an eye out for those Japanese players. Otherwise, here in America, I don't think it's going to see a ton of play, and that's
Um,
okay. Nothing wrong with
let's
that.
keep on scrolling. And if there's any other specific Pokemon you want to call out, especially with GLC or anything, but I don't think any of these are particularly interesting.
We can touch on this Grookey line
Oh,
real quick. Actually, this is kind of an
yeah.
interesting line here.
Hmm.
The Grookey is not super exciting. It's more the Thwackey, the stage one evolution of the Rillaboom line. The ability Boom Boom Drum. Once during your turn, if your active Pokemon has the Festival Lead ability, which we'll talk about more later on today, you may search your deck for a card, put it in your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this is a new theme deck, Festival Lead, things of that nature. They're all going to be kind of put together. It is essentially a quick search in a stage one Pokemon, which is pretty cool. There are some additional requirements that you have to have fulfilled in order to use that ability. But that being said, if you can make this work and be able to go find that one of whenever you want, and it doesn't say anything here about not being able to stack this card as far as I know, right?
I
So if you
mean,
had
by
three
stack.
Thwackeys,
Oh,
Oh,
Oh, it says
once during
once
your turn.
during your turn. But does
Okay,
that
never mind.
mean
Never mind.
that doesn't mean you can only use boom boom drum? Because usually it'll say that you can only use this ability
That's true,
once,
actually. Yeah.
right? Like
I don't know.
Pidgeot,
We'll have to look into that.
maybe the translation is off, but
Right.
once during your turn for this specific, hmm, it usually has the extra addition of like you can only use boom boom drum once.
So on Pidgeot, just as an example, which is the same exact ability, just a different name, it says you can't use more than one quick search ability each turn. So
Oh,
hypothetically, Thwacky is a stackable quick search. That's kind of nuts.
yeah, that is pretty crazy. Interesting. I mean,
Wow.
I do think this deck is also one of those decks that's built to just kill Charizard. I
Mhm.
think because Charizard's such a major meta threat, and this deck actually, with Boom Boom Drum and with the other cards that work with this, it will actually be a Charizard. I mean, we'll be able to take down Charizards and do a good job. I don't know if it'll be able to kill other meta threats, but the whatever. I mean, we'll see it later. The card that works with this one hit KOs Charizard. So you have Boom Boom Drum to search whatever cards you need. You have an attacker that one hit KOs Charizard. It's an interesting deck. I think actually these cards are going to be much more interesting in GLC. Being able to search out one card every single turn is
Mm.
pretty broken in GLC. So I think you don't even necessarily have to play this box. I think this box is clearly built to all work together. You would really just need the Thwacky. I don't think even, and you can use the old Rillaboom, who helps accelerate energy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use it as part of your old grass GLC. You can just use your one of obviously because you can only use one of the attacker with Festival Lead, and you can just recycle it if it ever gets knocked out. So I think it'll be interesting in GLC. We'll talk more about Festival Lead as we come across the Festival Lead Pokemon later.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're going to talk about it right now. We're going to dip into Diplin. That's what we're going to do. It has the Festival Lead ability. In case for those folks who are not aware of what this ability does, if Festival Grounds, which is a stadium, is in play, this Pokemon may use the attack it has twice. Any attack, more importantly. If the first attack knocks out your Pokemon's active attack, you may attack again after your opponent chooses a new active Pokemon. The attack, do the wave, 20 damage. This attack does 20 damage to each of your bench Pokemon. So if we're just looking at simple math against a Charizard, we're doing 200 damage per attack, and that's 400 damage that knocks out a Charizard. Fantastic. This also allows us to use things like TM Evolution right away. We can use that twice. Maybe it's TM Devolution, and we have a Charmander that's been
Sorry,
evolved into a Charmeleon.
I have to
Oh, good.
correct you. I have to correct you.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've had previous cards like Delta Species that are able to attack twice per turn, and you can
Mm.
attach TMs. The wording of this
Ah,
is very specific, so that you cannot do
yep.
that. It says this Pokemon may use any attack it
Yeah.
has. So the attack has to be
Mm.
on the card itself. I believe that's why they worded it that way. It cannot
Yeah.
use TM attacks twice, unlike
I
previously
just saw
printed
the
cards.
yeah the translator note here at the bottom. Yeah, I just read it. So actually, this is very reminiscent of when like Forest Silstone came out, right? Like this Path to the Peak actually shut down Forest Silstone, and the answer was no, it does not because the Pokemon does not have that ability. The tool card that's attached to the Pokemon has the ability. So we're getting to like really nitty gritty, finite details. Regardless, thank you for correcting. By the way, I totally missed that. The attack is still very, very good. The ability that this leads up to with Thwacky is still very, very good. Will it have a huge place in the meta aside from a Charizard counter? No, probably not. But I will guarantee you're going to see this card all over the ladder against
Just to
Charizard
kill
because
Charizards.
Charizard's everyone. Oh yeah, for sure, no doubt, no
Because
doubt.
without the weakness, it's actually only doing 100 damage twice, so 200
Yeah,
rather than 400. And 200's good, but you're not really one hit KOing anything in the meta. I guess with some tools or something, if you attached uh, like a not a choice belt, a what is the belt that if you're behind in prizes you do 30 more damage? Um,
Defiance,
Defiance Band.
Defiance
Then you could
band.
do
Yeah,
130 twice, 260. That could kill a lot of basic Vs, basic EXs. Um, but yeah, otherwise, I mean, it is only a stage one. It's not that difficult to get out. It's only a single prizer. So if you're able to do 200 damage every single turn and recycle your diplins, and also you use your Thwacky to get whatever card you need to kind of continue, continue this attack, 200 every turn or on a single prizer, that is pretty good. So maybe it could be, a meta threat. It's not that bad a deck. There are actually other festival lead Pokemon
Hmm.
in this release. I don't think any of them are actually any good other than Diplin. We'll go through and see them. Like, I don't think any of them are actually worth playing, but we can look at them and talk about their attacks as we go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Iron Leaves, real quick. I want to touch on this card very quickly for GLC purposes. First attack, not really concerned about it too much, but for a grass colorless colors. Avenging Edge, this is very much like a revenge attack that you would see in a lot of other cards that have been printed in the past. 100 plus damage. If any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon during their last turn, this attack does 60 more. In GLC, that's actually a really solid number to hit. And if you're familiar with the revenge attacks, they typically go from about 120 down to 40 on the next attack. You get that extra damage after someone has been knocked out, but on the following turn, should you survive, you're only doing about 40 damage. So being able to actually do 100 damage instead of that 40 or that 20 on the revenge attacks is not bad. So I think this Iron Leaves actually will see play in the Grass GLC decks. You already have Rillaboom that accelerates energy, and you have a Venusaur that actually doubles the energy. So you really only need to attach 2 energy cards to this Iron Leaves for it to be doing 160 damage upon knockout. It only has 1 retreat cost too. So I would say Iron Leaves, going to be a good card. You're going to see in GLC quite a bit.
And also, just interesting to note, I mean, just in case someone wanted to slide this into a standard deck, a future box
Mm-hmm.
deck, it only does 160. It's not quite enough. Just this much less to get that one hit knockout on Charizard. So it would be a really nice standard card, but it just needs something else. It needs additional tool, something else to on top of a revenge kill to get that one hit knockout on Charizard. So
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
unfortunate.
indeed. I think we can spend some time on the Poltergeist. I know we're
Hmm.
kind of slowing down here a bit, but there are some interesting cards coming out of this set. Poltergeist is this is the first card that we've ever seen of this particular Pokemon. Was released in the DLC of Scarlet and Violet. Ability Storehouse Hideaway. As long as this Pokemon is on your bench, prevent all damage from and effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon to this Pokemon. So a built-in bench barrier, very very cool. Nothing super exciting there, but it's actually going to be the evolution of this card, the Sinistra. If we scroll down a bit there, the attack called Spill the Tea, which if that isn't the most like modern day like thing I've ever heard, I don't know what is. But Spill the Tea, discard up to 3 basic grass energy from your Pokemon and play. This attack does 70 damage for each card you discard this way. Again, a counter to Charizard. 210 is nothing to scoff at. I tend to use that word a little too much. I might need to get away from scoffing. But anyway, that's not bad. 210. You're doing 420 against a Charizard. That's going to be more than enough to knock it out. That's not enough to knock it out with a Hero's Cape. But I mean, what is going to take a knockout on a Charizard Hero's Cape nowadays? So interesting. But that has a lot of synergy with our Sinistra EX. Will, if you want to go ahead and dive into that one.
Yeah, so once you've discarded a whole ton of energy with your, basic Sinistra, now you drop your Sinistra EX and you use Reciprocity. So for each basic grass energy in your discard pile, put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, then shuffle all the grass in. I feel like we've had a bunch of attacks like this. I feel like Bastia Legion is very similar, recycling energy
Mm-hmm.
back from your discard pile back into the deck. But so yeah, let's say you had at near the end of the game, you've discarded now 10 energies in your discard pile. You were able to shuffle all 10 back into your deck, and you can spread 200 damage or 2 times 10, 200 damage counters anywhere on your opponent's um, bench. So that's pretty cool. I mean, an end game, really, really big attack. I guess it needs a lot of it. You need to be able to do a lot of, or have a lot of energy in your discard in order to take a one hit knockout on a Charizard. I believe damage counters don't get affected by weakness, so you would need the full 330. You need at least like 16 energy in the discard pile to take a one hit knockout on a Charizard using the Synergy X. But if you could pick off little guys in the bench and take a couple prizes at once, it's Oh wait, no, on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you cannot spread them around like Sableye or anything. It has to all be on one Pokemon.
Well, I don't know. I mean, is that right? Because for each basic, does that mean like if I did 10 different energy, is that two for each one, and then I can separate that? Is that okay? 10. Here's the collective. I got to drop it in one
Oh,
place.
interesting. For each
I
basic
don't
energy
know.
in
I
your discard
mean,
pile, put two damage counters on one of your. No, I guess for each energy. So maybe you can spread it out.
yeah.
I mean, I'm
So I mean,
actually
this
not
is like
sure.
end game Sableye, right? Like you're gonna do
Yeah.
your chip damage with your one prize Sinistra,
Hmm.
and then you're just gonna go ahead and clean things up with your Sinistra EX. That's kind of what I'm thinking this deck is going to be like, and that's actually not a bad deck. I mean, 210 again, pretty relevant number to hit. I wouldn't say it's going to be like a face melter by any means, but being able to again just hit that 210 here, 210 there, go to boss and counter catcher, you're going to be behind in prizes more often than not, I would imagine, with this deck, and then you just kind of clean up with the reciprocity. I think that's pretty good, but again, we'll have to see how it does in Japan. We'll see, have to see how it does here when it comes to America. Not a bad card. I'm not super excited about it. I don't really think the Pokemon is that exciting to begin with. I think it's kind of a whatever design, but regardless, pretty decent attack. We'll have to see how it does.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, let's go ahead and
Teal.
carry on here. We did these ogre pawns some time ago,
Yes.
didn't we?
Yes, we did. So we talked about the ogre ponds in a previous episode. Feel free to go back. We go really really deep into these ogre ponds. Um, as a box, I don't know if the ogre pond box will actually be that good. They sort of all work together, and there's a specific tool item that allows you to like Thornton between all the ogre ponds, which is similar to the mechanic in the game where you can kind of switch the masks and it switches the types of attacks and abilities you can do in the game. Um, I don't know if the box will be that good, but I do think a few of the Ogrepon cards will actually be able to be used in other decks and be like have some utility outside of the box. I don't think necessarily this is one of them because it is the Teal Mask Ogrepon has a really great ability. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic grass card from your hand to this Pokemon, and if you attach any energy to this Pokemon in this way, you can draw a card. Sorry, the end is kind of cut off here, but it's you may draw a card. So it's a energy accelerator, it's a draw engine. I think that, in and of itself, you can't deny is a good ability, but it's only accelerating to itself. So it's not you're not able to accelerate to other Pokemon. You can't really use this as like a grass accelerator in any grass type deck. It's really I feel like to use in the Ogerpon toolbox or just in a straight Teal Mask Ogerpon deck. And the attack itself, 30 more damage for each energy attack attached to both active Pokemon. So I guess when you're hitting Charizard and you have a full three grass energy on it, it does 120 plus two more 150, 180, and that is enough to knock out a Charizard. 180 times two. So again,
Yeah.
just a lot of grass type Pokemon that are printed specifically to, really take out that Charizard. But yeah, we don't need to go too much
Yeah.
deeper into it. I don't think.
buy your uh buy your Gardenia's Vigor while you can. That's all I'm gonna say because they're just printing more and more grass Pokemon. As soon as we're getting, grass is getting the most attention I think it's ever gotten. At least as long as I've been playing in quite some time. I can't remember the last time a grass deck was really relevant. Even now, I would say there's no real relevant grass deck. I think they're trying here with this set, but there are good grass Pokemon. I think most namely is going to be the Iron Leaves EX. That's a great counter to Charizard right now. But even then, that's not seeing like a ton of plays. So grass Pokemon are there. They're trying to do their thing, but not going to be a tier one deck. And I still don't think it's going to be enough to take down Charizard. But we got to try. We got to try. We can go ahead and carry on here, though. We're moving into the fire Pokemon now. Vulpix, Ninetales, nothing super exciting. Slugma, Macargo. I guess we can touch on Macargo very quickly. It is an EX Pokemon, so let's go and take a look real quick. Macargo, 270 health, a stage one Pokemon, Terrestrial Fire type, so doubling down on that fire type typing. First attack, fire, colorless, hot magma, 70 damage. Your opponent's active is now burned. Status conditions don't have a real place in the meta right now, but maybe one day they will. The second attack for 2 fire, 1 colorless, ground burn, 140 damage. Each player discards the top card of their deck. This attack does 440 more damage for each energy discarded this way. The Cypher Maniac's code breaking, I guess, could throw some stuff on the top of your deck, but otherwise, I don't know how you're guaranteeing maximum
That
output
yeah.
every single
How do you
turn.
just you can't make sure your opponent is also has a energy at the top of
Yeah,
his deck, so you're just kind of hoping and praying. 280 is a good number, but it's kind of yeah. This seems like binder filler. This is not a good
um,
EX card.
unfortunately not. But that's all right. Let's go ahead and carry on here. The Torkoal, nothing super exciting there. This Chimchar line has
Mm.
implications for standard and GLC. So we're going to jump into that right now. In fact, we're going to skip over the first two. No one really cares.
Yeah,
The
this is the
Infernape
guy.
is really what. Yeah, this is a guy. Will, you take this one. I know you're excited
Okay,
about this card.
yeah. So I mean, Fire GLC has not been one of the best GLC decks. I think it just needs more support, and this is, I think, one of the support Pokemon that can really change the game. The ability is Fire Dancing. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic fire fighting energy or a basic fire energy, and or one of each. So basically both from your hand to your Pokemon in any way you like. So it does have to be in your hand, but there's a lot of ways to get two different energies in your hand. You have like Professor's Letter, you have Earthen Vessel. There's especially in GLC, I think there's like 3 or 4 different cards that can get you multiple
Hmm.
energies into your hand, and then you can accelerate both per turn to your Pokemon. So you can just accelerate a ton of extra energy per turn. I believe there's also, a couple Pokemon in GLC fire types that work really well with this. I think there's a Camerupt or something that does extra damage if it has a fighting energy attached to it, or maybe a Hisuian Arcanine, or both. I can't remember. No, Hisuian Arcanine might be fighting type. So yeah, no,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Camerupt is the one that's fire type and it does extra damage. But just in general, accelerating extra energy is good, and I think this card will be really healthy for GLC. And like you were mentioning
And
before,
yeah, the
I
Cinderace.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just if that card is legit and it is real, that first attack is going to be much easier to accomplish. The energy cost, at least. You're going to be able to be hit 280 pretty consistently with this Infernape. I think the beauty of this card, and I think what really makes it exciting for GLC, is it opens up the possibility of incorporating cards that you would have just, they're nothing. They're whatever. They're not useful. They're not helpful. They're not good cards. Infernape allows you to kind of look at those things a little differently. And more importantly, I think what's really interesting about this ability, it's not limited to the bench or the active, it's anywhere you like. So you could say, okay, I need one fire in the active, I need a fighting on the bench, I'm good to go. So I really do think this card is going to see a ton of play in the GLC format. Standard, it really just depends, right? We don't really have like a huge need for it right now. Charizard is really the major fire type deck here in the format. It does not need help accelerating energy. In fact, it probably needs to be tuned down a bit, but that's completely fine. It's already printed. I also think the attack actually isn't terrible. 200 damage is a lot of damage to do in GLC. So if you're playing fire out there, folks, I'm just telling you right now, if you're playing fire, you're going to be playing Infernape. Go find the optimal Inferno. Go find the optimal Chimchar and get ready to incorporate this card into your deck because I can tell you right now, it is good. It is very, very
yeah.
good.
200 is just a really that kills anything in GLC essentially. So, and you only have to discard one energy from it, and then you can just accelerate it back next turn if you need to. So, yeah, very very cool Pokemon.
Yeah, and it's got a cool, I don't know what they call it, illustration
Art,
rares. It's
yeah,
kind of a close up
illustration
of the
rare.
face or some art rares, maybe. I don't know, whatever it's called. That's going to be a cool card. I think it's going to be worth a lot of money. It's a starter. It's a fire starter. People love those things. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and carry on here. The Darumaka and the Darmanitan, not super exciting. I think we can kind of glance over these. Um, I think the Chandelier has something kind of interesting. Once during your turn, you may use this ability. Each player draws a card. We don't want to be helping our opponents. Maybe not that
Yeah,
one. We talked about this ogre pawn already. I think this is actually one of the worst ones that we had seen during that time.
yeah,
But just very quickly to jump into it, Ogre Pawn EX, 210 health. This is the fire type. This is going to be the Hearth Flame Mask Ogre Pawn EX. First attack, fire colors. Colorless Wrathful Hearth, 20 damage. This attack does 20 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And then we have a second attack for 3 fire energy, 140 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, it is 140 more. Discard all energy from this Pokemon. So again, not really much of a head turner. I don't think it's that great. So I think we just carry on and jump into
yeah,
water. Huh?
definitely.
What do
So
we got next here?
we got Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Poliwrath. I don't. Just quickly looking at this Poliwrath. 120 damage, you may do 120 more damage, so 240. I mean, it's a lot for GLC. I don't know if that'll actually
Mm.
be good in standard, but if you do shuffle this Pokemon and all attached cards back into your deck, I mean, getting stage twos out is very difficult. So, you know, in order to do the full 240 damage, you have to shuffle it back in. I don't know if necessarily that's worth it. So um, maybe it'll see some play in GLC, but definitely not standard. I don't think. It is interesting though that
Yeah.
the attack only cost double colorless. So um, I
Hmm.
mean, just double colors in general, and in GLC when there's multiple double, there's double turbo, there's double colorless. That is interesting, and you shuffle all attached cards back into your deck as well, so that double colorless can get reused. Um, Interesting. Maybe maybe some interesting GLC heads will be able to find a way to make this work. But
Yeah, it's not bad. Doing 240 and being able to basically go back to your bench and bring up like a whale lord or something is pretty great. So not terrible, but are we taking out any other, stage two line for this card? Probably not. But here's one of the cards you were talking about earlier not being very good. Another Festival League card. We already know what that does. It allows us to use our attack twice. Unfortunately, the attack here is not great. Two colorless energy. Whirlpool. 10 damage, flip a coin if it has discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So I guess you could discard two energy, which is very powerful, obviously, in the meta.
you have to
But
get two coin
it's
flips. You have to get two heads.
yeah, I don't know.
Best case scenario. So even if you're playing a deck that's meant to be disruptive. You play, hammers or whatever to knock off energies. You also are flipping coins every turn. I don't know if this is any good. I'm sorry.
No, no. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Because I mean, like you said, best case scenario, you're doing 20 damage and you discarded two energy, and you're gonna get destroyed next turn with 50 health. So I'm sorry, Goldie, but you're just not the play. But thank you for coming. We do appreciate it. We'll see you in the bulk. Sea King, Massive Change, really not much going on here either. These water Pokemon are actually pretty terrible, so we could probably just go through a whole bunch
Yeah.
of these. Crawdon, nothing really exciting for GLC. Feebas, not super great. The Milotic, though, was kind of interesting. The ability, Serenity, your opponent's Pokemon in play, and any cards attached to those Pokemon cannot be put into your opponent's hand. This does not need to be in the active, and this is essentially, again, a counter to Charizard, who is playing Professor Tour right now. Um, not not great. It's not. I mean, I guess it helps you in that moment, but I mean, who else is playing Professor Tour scenario? Zard.
I do think, well, I've also been looking at how people are building Dragapult EX. Um,
Uh,
Not only are they playing Toro, there's the new Ace Spec, which we'll get to later, Scoop Up Cyclone, which is an item card that allows you to put,
oh,
especially because Dragapult doesn't have weakness, there really is not many good ways to one-hit KO it. If it gets any damage on it, you Scoop Up Cyclone, bring it back to your hand. I guess, you could tech this in if that becomes a very popular strategy, but seems kind of niche
yeah. There is Penny. Penny is the other support that allows you to pick things
for
up and put them into your
basics.
hand. So for
Just for
basics
basics.
only, correct. So
Mhm.
it might see some play in some kind of weird control deck, but otherwise, I don't think it's going to see a lot of play. Snow Run, not super exciting. Glalie, not super exciting. I do think this Frostlass
Oh
honestly is
yeah,
not bad.
I think this
I do
Frostlass
think
is
this is
sick. I think this could see standard play.
take
I
it,
mean, in
take it.
in GLC, it seems really powerful. So the ability is
Mm-hmm.
Freezing Curtain during your Pokemon checkup. Put one damage counter on each Pokemon in play with an ability. So this is also like we were saying about the Grookey. There's no limit on this. So in standard, you could have three Frostlass, four Frostlass out. That means you could put during Pokemon checkup four damage counters per turn on each Pokemon and play with an ability. In standard format, Pokemon with abilities are incredibly powerful. So many decks play them. Bibarel, Manaphy, just like Charizard, just every major meta card I feel like has an ability. So four per turn. Plus, if you're playing, I don't know if you play this with Cloak or anything, but if you're playing a deck that also is already spreading damage, it really adds up. This seems pretty powerful.
The one caveat to this card, though, and I agree with you, I do think this is actually a really, really cool card, both yours and your opponents have to take these damage counters. So you could potentially be tacking on some unnecessary damage on your side of the field. There are ways I think around that in GLC. I'll have to like double check everything, but I don't know if you're going to be able to find a way to actually protect yourself in GLC. But in the standard, like you said, if you have 4 Frostlass and you have some very efficient attacker up front who you don't really have to worry about accelerating 3 energy to, this is a pretty good way to just set up chip damage, get all those things out there, and then just start not taking knockouts with this really efficient attacker. So I do think someone is going to be able to devise some kind of single prize water attacking deck that's just super efficient and really knowing to play against. Really, really cool. I want it to be good. I want it to see play. I
You
want it to be relevant. Will it be?
you know
I
what
don't know. We're gonna find out.
you know what makes this makes me think of is uh Serena EX. It's the Pokemon that I think
Oh,
leaves you with 30 hit points left. It does,
yeah,
right? So you get Serena EX out and you have 3 Frostlass on your bench. You basically one hit KO anything with an ability, anything that has an ability. Of course, if the opponent's Pokemon doesn't have an ability, you can't add those 3 extra damage counters during Pokemon checkup, but that
yeah.
would be an interesting wombo combo.
Serena EX, 1 grass energy, icicle soul. Put damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon until its rain HP is 30. I think it's important. One of your opponent's Pokemon. It doesn't have to be the active. It could be someone on the bench.
Hmm.
In the next turn, there's really nothing they can do about knocking out 4 Frostlass. You probably take that knockout pretty easily, and then you're able to, go ahead and do the whole thing all over again. So that's a pretty gross tech, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it,
Yeah, you
that
just
sucks. That's pretty good. Hmm.
against Charizard, you just one hit knockout their Pidgeot. If you have 3 Frostlass and a Serena, you one hit knockout their Rotom on their bench. If they have a second Charizard on their bench or a Charizard in the active, it gets knocked out. So yeah, that's pretty wild. And there's no
Yeah,
stopping
keep
Serena
it.
with like Jirachi or anything. Jirachi's only basic damage counters. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't really know what you can do here. I don't think there is a way to stop Frostlass in the standard. I mean, maybe canceling clone, but I
that's
don't
just
know
for
if that would
active.
work.
No, canceling
Just so
clones
it's
just
just
for
for
Pokemon
active.
in the active. Yeah.
So in that case, there is no way to stop Frostlass. So if you're looking for a cheeky single prize attack deck that can mess with your opponent and you just have a good time with it, Frostlass might be your play. That being said, let's go ahead and carry on here. We got a lot of other cool cards to go through. One of them I think is going to take quite a bit of time to walk through because I'm sure Will and I are going to have some interesting, maybe even conflicting opinions on this card. This is a very divisive card, probably one of the most divisive cards we've ever seen. We're going to talk about it later. But the Froakie, Frogadier, nothing super exciting there. The Greninja is very, very good. We're going to talk about that later on today. But if we're going through more water cards, unfortunately, nothing too much to talk about. This Palafin, though. Will, what are your thoughts on this card, man? Because I'm pretty excited about this card.
I'm really excited about this card too. I've seen also some sample decks. I don't think it's actually put up a ton of
Mm-hmm.
numbers in Japan so far. Again, it just came out this Friday. There's only been one weekend of results, so it's a bit early to tell. I think the biggest problem with this Palafin EX is going to be its weakness to electricity, and Iron Hands
Mm-hmm.
continues to be a menace in the format. Um, so that's the one problem. But I think other than that, 1 energy cost, 250 damage, 340 HP. If you're playing a deck again that's not playing Iron Hands, I feel like this deck can kind of hang with any of the other meta decks. It's doing tons of damage. Yes, you have to switch in and out with the zero to hero ability and evolve to the other Palafin. But from what I've seen about how people are building the deck, and I've seen some major like competitive players saying that doesn't seem that difficult to get out a Palafin EX and get it into the active on turn two. You just play a lot of switch cards. You play a lot of um, ways to like jet energy or switch or whatever, um, and it doesn't seem difficult to get this guy out and going. Turn two, 250 damage every turn. During your next turn, this Pokemon can attack, but because you have switch cards, you switch to the bench, switch it back in, and it can attack again. So 250 every turn, starting turn two with 340 HP. It's it's gonna be, I think, it's gonna be able to hang in standard. Depending on how big Iron Hands is next format and continues to be, it might prevent it
Mhm.
from being, a top tier deck, but I think it still will have an impact.
Yeah, for those folks who are not watching, but rather you're listening, I think it'd be good to read the ability on the baby Palafin, not the Palafin EX. Um, ability zero to hero. You heard Will say it earlier. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from your active spot to the bench, you may search your deck for a Palafin EX and switch it with this Pokemon. Any attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play, and any other effects remain on the new Pokemon. If this Pokemon if you switch a Pokemon and play this way, shuffle this card to your deck. So essentially, you are swapping that Palafin for the Palafin EX, and Hero Spirit, the ability on the Palafin EX, put this Pokemon into play only with the effect of Palafin's zero to hero ability. So there is no other way to get this card into play. You're going to have to use the Palafin zero to hero ability to get that swap in. Really, really cool card. I've never heard of a card that has this concept like this. I think this is really unique in that sense. But Palafin in general is kind of a unique concept in of itself when it comes to the Pokemon universe. So, really, really cool attack. Really, really cool ability. Neat concept. Tons of health. Really, really good damage. Very efficient attacker. You just got to be able to pilot this deck correctly. I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge is sequencing everything correctly to be sure that you're actually optimizing that damage output, and more importantly, you're getting your Palafin EX in play. So I'm excited about the card. I don't think it'll be something I build and play and experiment with, but I hope other people do, and I do hope it becomes successful one day.
Yeah, I mean,
All
the
right,
main
let's.
thing is, sorry, the main thing is switching, and
Oh no, go ahead. Go
there's
ahead.
a ton of switch cards in the format right now. So from what I've seen, it's not that difficult. And also, Palafin, the baby Palafin just has to switch from the active to the bench. But if you switch into a free retreater with a switch card, then you use only one switch plus a free retreat, and you get your main Palafin EX back into play. So
You could switch like from a Palafin to a Palafin EX that was already on the bench, and then that thing evolves, and then you already have the new Palafin EX. I don't know. You can change some crazy
yes,
stuff that way, but
definitely.
I mean, technically you could evolve four of these things in one turn. If you have all the switch cards you need and everything's kind of in place, you can just start evolving things like crazy. So I don't know. Maybe there was something there. I don't know. Someone smarter than me will figure it out. That being said, we got some other cards to talk about today. The Iron Bundle, not as good as I would say as the first print. Something interesting though. This Walking Wake was something I was kind of excited about for a second after reading the attack end up being a pretty big disappointment. So I don't think we have to talk about that guy too much. But if you're looking for more ancient cards to throw into your ancient deck, that could potentially be something. I wouldn't suggest it though. The Wellspring Mask Ogre Pawn EX is yet another Ogre Pawn that we're going to be getting from the set. I do think this is actually one of the better ones. That's I think it's about one of the better ones. Let me read this attack here. Watercolorless, colorless, torrential pump, 100 damage. You may shuffle 3 energy attached to this Pokemon to your deck. If you do, this attack does 120 more damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So 100 to the active, 120 to the bench. Not bad sniping, actually. That's pretty cool. You do have to discard all. I'm sorry, you don't have to discard. You have to shuffle all the energy back into your deck, so you're gonna have a hard time coming back your next turn. But that's why you have that. I think it's an item card that lets you swap ogre pawns or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly what it does, but eh. I guess it's eh. I don't know.
So I actually saw a build out of Japan for
Oh,
this card. I think this card is the best Ogre Pawn. So one of the big cards that Lugia is going to get in this set is Legacy Energy, which is essentially a Rainbow
mm,
Energy with an extra ability on top of it. It's a Rainbow Energy that also makes you take one less prize, or your opponent take one less prize if they knock out a Pokemon with that Legacy Energy attached. So the problem is the additional text underneath it says you can only use Legacy or the ability of losing one less prize card once per game. But this attack um, makes you shuffle all energy attached back into your deck, so you can Archeops a Legacy Energy to this Pokemon, so you can use the water cost.
hmm.
You can snipe 2 things, and then you can shuffle the Legacy back in, so you're not necessarily using that one Legacy. You can use it later for an Iron Hands EX. You can accelerate out again for an Iron Hands EX, so you can use the Legacy energy multiple times, despite
Hmm.
usually once a special energy goes into your discard, there's no way of getting it back. So it basically allows you to use that special energy twice. You get some snipe, you get some extra prizes with Iron Hands. Seems like it could be pretty broken.
Yeah, that's pretty sick actually. I had not thought about that. I mean, legacy energy, I've already kind of got my own uses for it inside of my head, but that's pretty cool. You're being able to recycle the energy. You don't have to worry about it in the discard pile. And if you really need to keep it on there, I guess you could and you take one prize less your opponent does. But something to keep your eye on, folks, certainly for when this card releases later in May. Zapdos, I mean, 190 damage, discard all energy. That might be like a good end game attacker in GLC. In standard, though, you're not going to see any play. Sorry, Zapdos. We're going to have to move on. Shinx, the Shinx line is actually really interesting, and the only reason it's interesting is because of the um, what is it called? What's the name of this card? I'm forgetting the name. What's the final evolution of this line?
A Luxray?
Luxray. Luxray, yes. That Luxray EX is actually a pretty interesting card, and there's really only one reason for that. It's going to be the first attack, colorless, Pierce Glare, I think is what it's called. 120 damage. Your opponent reveals their hand, choose a card you find there, discard it. So for a double turbo energy, you're doing 100 damage, and you're discarding a hand. So that could be a rare candy, that could be a Pidgeot, that could be a boss's orders. Whatever is going to hurt your opponent most in that moment is going to be able to be discarded. I think it's a really, really cool ability. That being said, I know some people are playing this in like a control setup. I know over in Japan, I know some US players are already talking about how they can incorporate this into control. It is a stage two, which makes it a little tricky. And it does give up two prizes. So I don't know if it's going to be super relevant. But that first
Isn't
attack, actually, I would argue is pretty interesting.
isn't there a Luxray V that basically does the exact same thing though? I feel like a lot of control plays Luxray V. It just trainer card instead of um it you can choose a trainer card in your opponent's hand and have them discard it. Of course, it also has less HP. It's easier to knock out, um, but it's also a basic, so you can just drop it without having to evolve up to a stage two.
Yeah, that Luxray V says for two colorless energy, do 30 damage of your opponent, discards a trainer, whatever you want to find there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously 100 damage is better than 10 damage, but I think you got a point there. This is on a basic Pokemon, so able to actually get to that hand a lot quicker than you would be able to with this Luxray EX. It's an okay trade-off, I guess, but just being able to get stage two Pokemon unless you're using like a rare candy or some other evolution acceleration method can be a bit difficult. So is it going to see a ton of play? I don't know. We'll have to wait to see if anyone smarter than me can cook up something with it. But for now, Luxray EX, an interesting card, I would argue. All right. Let's see Molga. Kind of interesting. Do 10 damage to each bench Pokemon using you and your opponents for one colorless energy. I guess that's okay. Chip damage. It's got free retreat, so I guess that could potentially be something one day, but not super
I mean,
exciting. This,
GLC GLC
oh
isn't
yeah,
a spread deck. Aren't spread lightning decks relatively popular for the lightning GLC? So just another way to spread just a little bit more.
yeah,
Of course, you're damaging
uh-huh.
yourself, but I do think there are cards that actually want you to be damaged, isn't there? Actually, I don't know, but I just think this could work in a GLC sort of spread deck archetype.
It could, very, very possible. This Heliolisk line is terrible. We can skip over it right away. Um, the Morpeko ability, actually, I think is kind of interesting. Morpeko, basic Pokemon, 70 health, electric type. Ability says snack search. Once during your turn, you may look at the top card of your deck. You may discard that card. What I find kind of, and this is just me being nitpicky at this point, it doesn't say you have to return that card back to your deck. Now, I know there's going to be someone out there at some local cup that says it doesn't say you got to return it. I can put it in my hand. I can put it on the bench. Someone's going to try to find some kind of weird little loophole. Clearly, that's not what this card is trying to do, but you can imagine what I'm trying to get at. Um, it's kind of like a half built-in gutsy pickaxe, which is kind of cool, I guess. So.
So I also was looking at Dex lists again out of Japan, so it's very early, but Miraidon has not been that good since post rotation. It lost a lot of cards. Um, this I saw this actually being played in new Miraidon decks, and it's not only because of the
Hmm.
ability, but it's also because of the attack. You know, you have the attack pick and stick, attach up to two basic energy cards from your discard pile. to your Pokemon in any way you like. So turn one, you can sort of accelerate more energies to an Iron Hands, to a Miraidon. So that's really good. But also, uh, if you just have the Morpeko still on your bench later in the game, before you play an Electric Generator, you can peek at the top card, see if it's an energy or not, and if it's an energy, you can leave it there. Make sure you get at least one attachment with your um, Electric Generator, and if it's not a lightning energy, and if it's a card you don't mind discarding, you can discard it and give yourself an extra shot of maybe reaching another energy deeper into the deck.
Pretty cool. I like the name of the attack actually. Pick and stick. I think that's kind of fun. So if nothing else, the name of the attack is very very cool. But that's a cool concept. I was thinking about the electric generators. You would explain it, and then of course you touch on it. So I think that it has some merit in of itself just because of that. So something to keep an eye out for you Miraidon players. Let's go ahead and carry on here. We have a Tad Bulb that's not super exciting. The Belly Bulb, not really relevant for standard or GLC. The Wall Troll. No, not really much going on there. Kilowatt Troll, not really excited either. This Iron Thorns, though. Will, I don't know if you got a
Oh,
chance to take a look at this card or
yes,
not.
this Iron Thorns is sick.
I think it's bad for the game, dude. I really
No,
do.
I think it's cool. I think it's really cool.
Someone's going to play a four line of this. That's
Yep.
all they're going to play. They're not going to
That
play no Greninjas, nothing, no Bibarels, and it's going to be a terrible thing for the game. I'm calling it right now.
Yeah, it's not even a future box. I think it's going to be straight just Iron
Mm-hmm.
Thorns EX with lightning or electric generators, and you just can, even if they try to boss you out, you only have Iron Thorns, and you just prevent the other person from playing. The ability says as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with a rule box in play have no abilities except any future Pokemon. So yeah, I mean, this just stops Charizard in its tracks. It can't accelerate to itself. You're gonna have to accelerate, by hand. So many rule box Pokemon with have abilities that are vital to its existence. So I think this, like a stall type Iron Thorns EX deck. Its attack, only does 140 energy. You can move energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon. Um, the attack's not anything to write home about. It basically two hits KOs any Vs or V stars. Doesn't two hit KO most it's like stage two EXs or anything Charizard or Dragapult, but um, it's just an annoying card, and I think it could have yeah, I mean it could have a big effect on the meta.
That card drags Lugia through the mud, through his mama's house, and then back through the mud again. That is, I don't know. I think this is. So we were talking about Charizard about a week or two ago being toxic, maybe not being so good for the game. And you brought the counterpoint, like, you know what? We actually are seeing some pretty diverse results at the end of the day. Charizard is always winning, but it isn't. I mean, it isn't like where was it? The Philippines. I think it was like
Eight
10 of the top
Charizards.
12, or yeah, something like that, some ridiculous number. The issue I see with this card is if indeed people just say, here's four Iron Thorns, here's 20 energy, and here's a bunch of random trainer cards that we're going to incorporate into the deck. I'm Who beats this thing? I mean, 140 damage knocks out a Roaring Moon, it knocks out a Koraidon. If we're talking about Ancient Box,
Ancient Box, they're single prizers. They don't have rule boxes. I think Ancient Box could
yeah,
keep up with Iron Thorns. I think, you know, Dunsparce, Roaring Moon. Also, those Pokemon don't really have rule boxes. I get you can't use your Roaring Moon EXs, but Roaring Moon EX doesn't have an ability, so that doesn't matter. Actually, you still can use them. Yeah, I mean they're
you can't use your Dunsparce. That ability gets shut down.
it's not a rule box. It's not a rule box
Oh no,
Pokemon.
I'm sorry. Yeah, rule box. That's right. Yeah, Roaring
So
Moon, Ancient,
even Qianpao.
Lost Box.
Lost Box, yeah, they don't tend to have, they don't tend to have abilities. Even Tina doesn't have an ability on it, does it? No, there's no abilities on. So
No, that's an
Tina,
attack.
Chen Pao. I mean, the ability on Chen Pao is sometimes pretty important to draw energy from the deck, but I think Chen Pao could survive without it. You still. Oh no, your Greninjas can't even discard energy into your discard pile.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, that probably could. I mean, Chen Pao and Charizard, I think, would be hurt. The one problem about Charizard is it's only two energy though. Like you just attach two turns in a row, and you're still doing a decent amount of damage. Would this kill Charizard? I think it would definitely hurt it. Turns off Pidgeot. Yeah, actually, this probably would probably destroy Charizard, I have to say. Um,
I mean, I would play 4 Arvin, 4 electric generators, and just go to town. That's the way I would play, but I'm not trying to encourage anyone from building this deck because I really do think this is not going to be good for the game. I might be getting ahead of myself. I might be being a bit dramatic, but if it is indeed what I think it's going to be, this might be one of the cards that we see get banned for the first time in a long time. Again,
no
I don't
way.
want to get too
No.
far. I don't want to get too far.
No way.
But if it really is that point where you can't even play the game, and you're just getting it's death by 1,000 lashes,
I
it's not going to be good for the
I mean,
game. Just
Stall
telling
wasn't
you right now.
banned. Stall wasn't banned, and I think Stall is in a good place right now. Has a ton of cards, airy, and they're printing. I mean, there's more cards in this set that are really good for control and for Stall. I don't think this card gets banned or anything. Um, I mean, what's interesting is it also does work with Iron Hands. You can even use a baton on this. If it gets knocked out, the energy gets distributed. So you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
use this in combination with Iron Hands to take extra prizes. Make sure you're always keeping your energy in play. It even, every time you attack, it moves an energy to the bench. Um, yeah, this deck will be a menace, I think. This deck will definitely be an annoying,
I'm
annoying
telling you,
menace.
Arvin gets you a bravery charm and electric generator, and you're just accelerating energy. You're a big, bulky, basic Pokemon. I don't know. I'm a little concerned about that card. Well, that being said, we're going to jump out of the electric energy into the psychic Pokemon now. We have a Clefairy and a Clefable. Nothing super exciting. Metronome has been printed for years. Everyone thinks it's always going to be the next best thing. It never ends up working out. So let's just go ahead and move on. We have our second Kadabra since the whole lawsuit was settled some time ago. It's an okay card. I do think that maybe the Alakazam might be okay for GLC. I don't know if there's better Alakazams out there. I don't know if there's a better Stage 2 Pokemon out there for Psychic GLCs, but first attack, Strange Hack for 1 Psychic Energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is not confused. Move any number of damage counters from your opponent's Pokemon to the other Pokemon any way you like. So we have some damage counter manipulation. And the second attack, Psychic or just Psychic for 1 Psychic Energy. 10 plus damage. This attack does 50 more damage for each energy card attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if we're just looking at, say, 3 energy on attached to your opponent's active, that's 160. And in GLC, it's a pretty good number to hit. So Alakazam, maybe see something in GLC, but in the standard, it's not really going to see too much.
Yeah, no, for
Let's go ahead
sure.
and carry on here, I guess.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm not seeing
no,
any
not too
cards
much
there.
here. No. What's this ability say? What's your return? Flip a coin, switch, confused. Nope, nothing super exciting. We have another festival lead card with the Swirlix, but
Another
a
terrible
little bit
festival
like
lead.
our Goldeen. Yeah. Sneaky placement, put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you can put 4 damage counters.
That's
Just play
so
Sableye,
bad.
folks. Just play
That's
Sableye. Yeah, just play
so
Sableye.
bad. Oh, I just want to call out
We're
this
getting through
Sandy
these
Gas.
second.
I love the clay. Anytime they do like the little claymation, or I just want to call out the art on
Mm-hmm.
this card is really really cool. But the attack and it's not a particularly good attack or anything.
Yeah, unfortunately not. No. Uh, let's see.
We got a Screamtail EX.
Screamtail's an EX. Yeah, it's something, I guess. First attack, again, not super exciting. 1 colorless energy. The attack is called Shriek. You can use this attack if you go second and only during your first turn. So after that, the attack is completely useless. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any supporter cards from their hand. So if you're able to get the setup turn 1 going second, it gets this pretty good disruption. It allows you to kind of set up a little bit quicker. But a lot of people, a lot of decks nowadays can actually get by just playing those item cards instead of the supporters. So 2 prize liability, that I don't know. This is a 25 cent EX I've ever seen one in my life.
Definitely.
Let's see. Actually, these are interesting cards here.
Yeah,
Have you
these
seen these,
two are
Will?
interesting. Yeah, these two are very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and break them down. If you want to take Monkey Dory, I'll take the
Okay.
Pheasantipity.
So Monkey Dory is a new Pokemon, brand new from the DLC, and it says if this Pokemon has Adrenaline Brain Adrenaline Brain is the name of the ability. This Pokemon has any darkness energy attached. You may use this ability once during your turn. Move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So I do think this ability is pretty cool, but the cost of having to have a darkness energy attached makes it a bit difficult on a psychic card. So, if you wanted to play this in, for example, Gardevoir, which is constantly giving yourself damage counters, um, and then every turn you can move damage counters from your Pokemon to your opponent's Pokemon, that would be really annoying. That would really prevent them from getting as many knockouts on your Pokemon. But Darkness Energy, you can't accelerate that from your discard. You can't accelerate from your deck. You just have to kind of draw into it, or maybe play. Um, what is the Rainbow Energy that's currently in format? Uh, Luminous, Luminous Energies, I guess,
Luminous, thank
and
you.
just hope
Yeah.
to draw into them like four Luminous Energies or something. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's really worth it. Maybe in GLC, if you can find a way to make it work.
I when I first saw this card, I was like, okay, cool concept. I think we can make this work. The more I think about it and just kind of hearing you kind of explain your thoughts on it, I think this might be the worst one out of the bunch. I forget the name of them. The Loyal Three, I think is what they're called from the GLC. I don't remember the full lore behind it, but essentially they were perceived good Pokemon that ended up being bad Pokemon, which is why you have that psychic plus a little bit of hint of darkness. I think that's kind of the theme it's playing into. But here's Pheasantipity, very similar concept ability. It says adrenaline pheromones. If any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks and this Pokemon has any dark energy attached to it, flip a coin if it's prevent that damage. And the attack here says for one psychic energy feathers, 30 times damage. This attack does 30 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. So I take it back. I think this is actually the worst of the three. Monkey Door being number two. The fighting Pokemon that comes out of this,
Okidogi?
that bear thing.
Okidogi, I
Okay,
think.
oh, it's a dog? Is it
I
a
think it's
dog
a
or is it a bear?
dog. It's called Okidogi. I believe that's the name. We'll see it in just a second.
Yeah, well, I don't know what that thing is. It's just this big, ugly. It might be a Shibu. Like a mutated Shibu dog. I don't know what it is. We're going to talk about it right now. But Sandshrew Sandslash, unfortunately, nothing super exciting here. The Hisuian Growth Arcanine line is actually pretty interesting. They tend to
Yeah.
give the same treatment to these cards. They always have some kind of free attack. Aren't you planning on playing this card in your JLC?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just in general for a stage one free attack, it does 30 damage. If your benched Pokemon have any damage counters on them, this attack does 90 more. So 120 is just where you're starting to get to be enough damage in GLC, I think, especially because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of ways to affect your damage in fighting type. You have Grant, you have a lot of tool cards that can buff your attack. You have a Stadium card that can buff your damage from your attacks. So for free, doing 120 damage if you have bench damage. There's so many Pokemon that also do Earthquake damage to your own bench. You constantly have damage counters on your bench. I think this card is going to be great.
Yeah, GLC, I think it's going to see a lot of play. Standard, it might get a little work because this Hisuian Arcanine is just so popular, but is it going to be, it's not going to be a relevant deck, I wouldn't call it, but someone will try to
No.
make it work and have some fun with it. Don't be surprised if you see it on the ladder from time to time. The Nose Pass and Probo Pass, again, not very exciting, nothing to really take note of there. This Timberline is actually pretty interesting. The first two cards, as usual, not super excited, but the Conkeldurr, the stage two of his evolution line,
Hmm.
pretty interesting card here. For fighting, colorless energy, gutsy swing, 250 damage. If this Pokemon is affected by a special condition, ignore all energy in this attack's attack cost. So, free 250. Um, Brew Bonnet, attach the ancient capsule thing, poison everybody, 250 damage. Fighting isn't the worst typing to be hitting weakness for because you have things like Iron Hands, potentially even a Luxray EX, potentially even an Iron Thorns EX. So fighting isn't a terrible typing right now. A little tricky to get that all set up and ready to go. If you don't have the special condition, it's kind of for naught, but
I
might
mean,
see something.
in standard, there's a lot of ways to dam to get a special condition. Like you said, Brute Bonnet. There's Curry. There's a lot of ways to get. Oh wait, no, Curry rotated actually. I think
Curry
think Curry
rotated,
rotated.
oddly enough.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. So you really just have your Bonnet, but Bonnet plus Radiant Hisuian Sneasler. So you're basically doing 280 damage with
Mm.
poison plus the radiant human sneasler. Those are good numbers for a one prizer for free. That's pretty cool, but I don't know. I don't think you should be, you know, this isn't the next iteration of cloth or anything. I don't think it's going to be the next cloth.
Yeah. An interesting card, but again, I don't think it's going to see a ton of play. I think one card, though, that is going to see a ton of play for multiple reasons, that, as far as I know, isn't really providing or showing the results in Japan like we thought it would, is Greninja EX, the newest Greninja card brought to us by the Pokemon Company. And really, what we're thinking about here is going to be that first attack. The second attack, not bad. We're going to jump to that in a second here. But this is a terrestrial fighting type Greninja. As you know, typically it's water. That explains the attack cost for these attacks for one water energy Ninja Blade, 170 damage, pretty decent damage output. The bigger thing here is you may search your deck for a card and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. So 170 damage, one energy, not bad, but being able to search for something and set yourself up for next turn immediately, paying any kind of Iono or Judge or something along those lines, a Roxanne perhaps, pretty good ability. But it's not really seeing results. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's just the damage output is too low. I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, you basically have to two-hit KO everything. I think it's not as good as Pidgeot because it goes to your hand after you attack, so it can be Ionoed out of your hand. You know, you could be disrupted. You're not getting that card immediately. Um, and then the second attack, I mean, actually is also just as interesting, I think, which is Duplicate's Barrage. Discard two energy from this Pokemon. It does 120 snipe to two of your opponent's Pokemon. Um, that's pretty good, but again, Manaphy is in format. Bench barrier has been a thing for a long time, so I don't know if it's going to be that viable of an attack. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if 170 is just enough. You're two hit KOing everything. You have psychic weakness, which I guess psychic isn't that powerful in the standard format right now. But one of the other main problems I think is, it's a fighting type, so you can't search for it with like Irida. If it was a water type like Greninja was, you could
Mm.
search for it with Irida. You search a rare candy too, like Baxcalibur. Make sure you guarantee get it out every single turn. Um, I don't know if it makes sense to play alongside Pidgeot like Charizard does in order to make sure you get it out every single turn. Yeah, I think just 170 is not quite 170 plus search might not be quite enough.
And I think ultimately we all kind of fell victim to the Greninja hype. Greninja rating Greninja is very good cards. He's playing a lot of different decks, so I think that's probably what happened here. Maybe Greninja EX isn't that good of a card, but time will tell. Speaking of time, we are nearing almost 2 hours in this episode. Apologies for that, folks. So we're going to try to jump through this a little bit quicker. So let's just go ahead and carry on here. The Halucha, the Glimmet, nothing really super exciting. Another Glimora card that really isn't going to prove to be super exciting. The Tinglu may not be terrible if there's a stadium play, do 30 damage to all of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Discard that stadium. Good chip damage. And I think, Will, you were talking about this being GLC or something,
Yeah, I
or
think this is going to be a really, really good card in GLC. I think Palossand is a Pokemon that also does 30 to all of your opponent's Pokemon.
mm,
Um, you have multiple now spread damage in fighting type, and they both cost only one single fighting energy. So I don't think it's going to be difficult. There's lots and lots of stadiums in GLC, so I don't think it's going to be difficult to have a stadium out, attach a fighting energy, spread 30. Then next turn you have your Palossand evolved. You also spread with Palossand, and now you have 60 damage spread. And if they aren't able to respond to one of those Pokemon, next turn you have 90, and you might be wiping out multiple Pokemon at that point. And I think spread is actually not a bad viable uh, tactic in GLC. Plus, I think
agreed.
there's
Definitely agreed.
another card I was telling you about. I think it's Delta species Mon. No, what is it? It's a fighting monkey. I can't remember what the monkey is. It's like
Mindfu or Mind
Mindfu or
Shao. Yeah.
something like that, and it allows you to attack twice, but you can devolve twice if you attach the devolution TM.
Mm.
Devolve twice, especially with all this spread damage out, you could board wipe at that point. So I think that could be an interesting spread archetype.
Sounds pretty sick. Let me know when you build it. We'll have to get a game in. We were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier. Okidogi, another of the loyal three. The ability here says Adrenaline Power. If this Pokemon has any dark energy attached to it, it gets 100 plus health. So that brings it from 130 to 230. And its attacks do 100 more. So we're going from 70 to 170 to your opponent's active Pokemon. Before applying weakness and resistance. So you're able to get to some of those crazier numbers. If you're going up against like an Iron Hands, it's able to take a one-hit knockout. And then the attack here is called Good Punch for 70 damage. So kind of an interesting name there. I don't really know what's going on with that. But I think Okidogi is probably the best one out of the three. We're talking about 230, 170 damage output, single price Pokemon. And there really isn't a lot you have to do. You have to get that fighting energy on there. You have to get that dark energy. Pretty cool card, but we're not going to switch too much time on it. Let's go and jump onto this last Ogerpon card. I thought this is the best one out of the three. The ability here says prevent all damage from attacks sent to this Pokemon by opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. So Charizard can't touch this thing. Chien-Pao can't touch this thing. I guess we're talking about some of the newer Pokemon that we just discussed here. Iron Thorns can't touch this thing. So you have some pretty relevant Pokemon that cannot even do anything to this Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX. The ability, or sorry, the attack 140 damage for fighting colorless colors isn't terrible. I think Ogerpon decks are going to be some kind of toolboxing where you're kind of swapping them depending on the need of that time in the match. We'll see how it turns out, though. I don't want to get too ahead of myself.
And I think this card could be slotted into other decks. Just having
Mm-hmm.
that barrier against Pokemon with abilities could be really strong. If they don't anticipate it or tech for it, and they have only attackers that have abilities, you could just stall them out and win the game right there.
Agreed. I want to touch on one card when it comes to the darkness type, because again, we are approaching almost 2 hours in this episode. Apology, folks. The Brute Bonnet, we had talked about this card some time ago. I just want to touch on it one more time. I still think being able to take some really big knockouts with this thing is going to be relevant in Ancient Box in some capacity. 50 plus damage. This attack does 50 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So typically in the Ancient Box, you're not really doing these massive one-hit knockouts, especially early game. So if you're able to get some chip damage on a Charizard, as an example, with Koraidon, or maybe a single attack from Roaring Moon, you're able to come back with that Brute Bonnet, take knockout next turn. You will have to play, I think, 4 Dark Patch to really make this thing like consistently effective, which doesn't feel great, admittedly. I will admit that it does not feel great because there's much better cards you've been playing except Brute Bonnet, and that Dark Patch really isn't relevant except for anything the Dark Roaring Moon and Brute Bonnet. It might see something. I don't know. I'm going to try to make it work because I do think the damage output for this card is actually really important, but we'll see. It might just be something you replace one of the Flutter Mains and then you have like a 3 Flutter Main, 1 Brute Bonnet line. We'll see how that works out, but that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I mean, I do think though, 3 retreat cost is always, once you get to that many retreat costs, you accidentally start this guy, could really screw over the beginning of your game. At least the what is it called?
Flutter Main.
Flutter Main's only 1 retreat cost, so if you accidentally ever
Yeah.
started, attach, retreat, you're fine. So despite the attack being pretty good, it could also really, really screw up your start if you happen to get him in the.
Agreed. And maybe Ancient Box isn't where this thing lands. Maybe it is more of like a Roaring Moon build where you have some more energy acceleration. That the dark energy isn't going to be such a big deal. Energy switch. I don't know. Again, just something I was thinking of there. When it comes to still Pokemon, nothing super exciting. In fact, I think we can skip over all these
Mhm.
guys. There is something that we want to get into the Dragon Zone. I want to touch on a couple things here very quickly. One, the Applin allows you to play the Flapple in your Dragon GLC. I currently have it proxied in mine. Being able to do 50 damage for each ability with that Flapple is really, really cool. Definitely recommend you play it. But more importantly, this is what I think Will and I really have been wanting to touch on today. This is going to be the Dragapult line. Dreepy, Dracloak, and Dragapult EX. Will, go ahead and take the Dracloak. Let's talk
The
about that one
Dracloak is
first.
basically, like we said, it's like a new airmail. It has the ability Reconnaissance Raid. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one of them into your hand. Put the other card on the bottom of your deck. Just lets you look just a little bit deeper. It lets you pick that one extra card you need to continue, um, you know, wombo combo and getting all your Pokemon out. Just always really good. Of course, you can have multiple Dracloak out. You can Reconnaissance Raid multiple times per turn. just dig really deep. And of course, the Dragapult EX, as we mentioned before, it's the second attack, Phantom Dive, that is really the important one. It costs 1 fire and 1 psychic, and you can do 200 damage and then put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way that you like. So, yes, you're only doing 200 to the active. You're not really necessarily going to be taking a one-hit knockout on any real major two-prize threats. But on that next turn, you're spreading 60 to the you spread 60 to the bench. Then on the next turn, you might be able to take multiple prizes. You can maybe boss something else up, the one that had 60 damage on it, do 200 damage and take uh, 2 prizes on that, and then also do 60 damage to the one that you'd done, 200 so you could take 4 prizes in one turn on 260 HP Pokemon. Like if you were playing, let's say what's it called? What is the Pokemon with 260 HP? The metal one that you play. God,
Goldango.
Goldango. Yeah, playing Goldango, you could take 4 prizes on in 2 turns, which is very very good. And just spreading in general is really good. You could play Radiant Alakazam. You could move the damage counters around to kind of get the perfect math. It's getting a lot of results out of Japan, so people are saying that this card is really really good. And of course, you have no weakness. So only the Pokemon that can do really really high damage output, like Chen Pao, be able to take one hit knockouts, or I guess Lugia with Minccino, but otherwise everyone else is two-hit KO on this guy.
Yeah, I think Dragapult, it's going to see play. There's zero doubt about that. I've been waiting for another Dragon card to come out that was not guaranteed that you can actually play. Regidrago, I did my best with that deck. It just never really saw the results I wanted it to. But I do think Dragapult, pair with that Xatu, pair with the Mela, you're going to see some results with this card. I can guarantee you that. I'm really excited for this deck, and it probably will be the next one I play. Speaking of other dragons, Tatsugiri. I think this is the second copy of this card that has a dragon typing associated with it, and the ability. And this is something I wanted to ask you all. I'm really curious to your opinion on this. So, if we're looking at this strictly from a JLC perspective, I do think it will see play in the standard format, maybe just a little bit. But here it is in JLC. So let me read the ability first, and I'm going to pose a question to you. So, ability attract customers. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal a supporter card you find there, put it into your hand, shuffle the other cards back into your deck. Here's my question for you. In Dragon JLC decks, they typically do play, I know I do play, a Dratini line where the Dragonite says, go find that one supporter, put it in your hand. The issue with that is it can be a little difficult to get to that Dragonite. More importantly, it's kind of difficult to get to it quickly. Do you think that taking out that Dragonite line, putting in the Tatsugiri, play a Float Stone or something along those lines, is that the more efficient play?
100% yes. It's a basic. Every deck plays Floatstone, so every single turn, if a Pokemon gets knocked out, every turn you're getting to search 7 cards for a supporter card. You're going to get exactly what you need, if not every turn, maybe like every other turn. And because this card's going to come out 3 turns earlier, like you're really getting to churn and see through stuff that you need to. I think this card is strictly better. And Dragonite isn't a good attacker. It's not like it has
No.
multi-use. I feel like there's a lot of Pokemon that have good abilities, can attack, and also help you get set up. I think uh, putting in 3 cards, taking up that space, it doesn't attack, and it only gets you supporter or whatever card you want later in the game. I think by that time you're usually relatively set up. You have your attackers, like especially with double dragon energy and stuff. You're attacking relatively early with dragon too, so yeah, I think this card is we're just 100% better.
Yeah, and we could touch on some of the standard stuff very quickly with this. We have Rescue Board or whatever what is it called? Rescue Skateboard or something on those lines. Basically, any basic Pokemon, one energy less to retreat. You can throw that on there, and that's your free pivot every single turn. You get knocked out. Here's your Tatsugiri. Look at the top 6. Oh, there's a boss. That's exactly what. Oh, there's the professor's research. It bails me out of my terrible hand. So Tatsugiri, and also has an insane art rare, whatever those things are called,
Yeah,
that a lot of people are going to be clamoring after. I think this is going to be one of those cards that sees a lot more play. Um, I don't know if it's going to be good immediately, but I do think it's going to be even better as the format carries on. I just kind of get the feeling out of that. I don't know why, but Tetsugiri folks, pick them up all you can. Once the set releases, go ahead and buy those art rares. This card is going to see a lot of play in many different formats, so get excited about that one.
Yeah, and I saw it played with Dragapult, with Lance. You can search out three dragons. You can search out your Tatsugiri. You can search out two Dracloaks, or a Dracloak and a Dragapult and a Tatsugiri. You can really just get everything set up. I also saw people using it in Lost Box. Lost Box or Lost Tina even is always digging for
Mm,
colorists. But
hmm
if you pivot your Tatsugiri in with an emergency board every turn, you make sure you guarantee you get your colorists. Then you switch again into your comfies and your everything else. But you're seeing so many cards every turn. You're making sure you see your colorists. I think this deck is. I mean, this card's DLC standard. It's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Tatsugiri. Um, Not a ton of cool things coming out of the color side of things. We do have a Blessy EX that some people are saying is great, other people are saying it's terrible. I think it's just okay. 300 health, typical high number for a Blissey EX on stage one Pokemon. That's quite a lot. Ability, Happy Switch. Once during your turn, you may move a basic energy card from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. So it's just a built-in energy switch. Pretty cool. And then for 180 damage, three colorless energy return. You may draw until you have six cards in your hand. That
That's
is pretty
good.
good. That's good. 180 damage isn't a ton. You throw on a maximum bell or some kind of choice bell or something, you are able to get to that 200, that 230 number. Um, but being able to replenish your hand and just completely exhaust your hand at the end of your turn, attack, and then go ahead and replenish everything. You're set up for the next turn. You have a 300 health behemoth that isn't going to get knocked out very easily. I don't know if it's going to be like incredible, but I think it's not bad. It's not bad at all.
And with Sharon's Care, and you can move the energy off of your Blissey to another
Mm,
Blissey and Sharon's Carrot, so you're not losing the energy. You can kind of constantly recycle. It could be okay. I mean, I don't
it
think
could be okay.
like tank and heal has actually ever been a good uh, strategy in any format that I've been a part of. But hey, maybe this Blissey X finally breaks through and does it.
We'll see. Who knows? Let's go ahead and carry on a bit further. Snorlax, no good. Apom, Ambipom. Ambipom is kind of interesting. When you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may flip two coins of heads. Choose for each heads, choose a random card from your opponent's hand and reveal that card to shuffle into their deck. So a little disruption there, but who's going to play it in the standard format? Probably no one. Ducklet, Swanna, as boring as ever. Blood Moon Ursulina EX. If you don't know about this card already, you've probably been living under a rock. We've talked about it before in multiple different episodes. Everyone is talking about this card. The simplest way to put this, it's Radiant Charizard, but I would argue better. That's my only
Better
thing.
and worse in some ways. I mean, it
Yeah.
ends up being free if your opponent has taken five prize cards. Your opponent the energy cost is completely free, not like a single fire energy, it's just completely free. If it's four energy, it's only one colorless energy, so it can be played in any deck, whatever color energy you're playing. Once your opponent's taken four prize cards, you just drop one energy card on it of any type, and it can attack and do 240 damage. I do think strictly 240 is just the difference between 240 and 250 is important. You know,
hmm
Even with a damage buff, you're not hitting 280 to get to V's and V stars like Radiant Charizard can. You really kind of cap out at 270 unless you're playing maximum belt or something like that. But in general, I think this card can be slid into so many decks. It has been in Japan. Basically, any deck can slot this in and it's just a really good card.
Yep. Also has a really cool secret illustration rare that's going to be extremely expensive in any country you go to. So, Blood Moon Ursulina EX, get ready for that card. All right, we're finally at the trainers, folks. We have some good cards to get through. I don't think we're going to go through every single one because we're well over 2 hours at this point, but let's go ahead and carry on. Bugcatcher set, going to be everywhere in Grass GLC. Might even see a little bit of play in Standard. What this says is it's an item card. Look at the top seven cards of your deck and reveal up to two in any combination of Grass Pokemon and Grass Energy. Put them in your hand, shuffle other cards back into your deck. In Grass GLC, obviously, this is very good. Being able to go grab those things is very easy with this card. But in the standard format, we know that grass decks aren't really super relevant right now. They're starting to get there, but you probably play this with like that Diplin line, and maybe you can get something going there. But otherwise, it's very niche. You're not going to see a ton of play anywhere else. Let's see, Caretaker. Let's go and carry on. Carmine. A
This
lot of
card
people
is
are.
very cool.
This is an interesting card. If you go first, you may play this card during your first turn. So you can play a supporter going first on turn one, discard your hand and draw five. Almost a little bit like Squawkabilly EX, but if you do Squawk, this card, and maybe you've been able to set up some other cards that allow you to draw, you could potentially go through more than half your deck just turn one alone. So Carmine, I don't know if it'll see play. What do you think of? What do you think on that?
Oh, I think it definitely will see play. Looking through the Japanese lists since this new set came out, Lugia really likes this card. Lugia always has trouble finding ways to
Mm.
discard its Archeops. So if you happen to have an Archeops in hand turn one, you can get an extra chance to use a supporter card, discard churn, just get a little bit further in your deck. But also just in general, I think the ability to use a supporter turn one and just see more cards so many times in this format, people are just choosing to go second because supporters are so powerful. Um, and if you just draw into a dead hand turn one and don't have the ability to use a supporter, sometimes that can be the death of you. That can just completely end your game right then and there. And I think having the ability um, to churn more is good.
Yeah, and I want to note real quick, this card does not say you have to exclusively play it on turn one going first. You can play it at any point during the game, so it does have utility later on. Use that on your first turn. Not terrible, so something to keep an eye out for. Community Center, not super excited that we can go over that. Cook, that's a reprint. 70 on there. We're going to carry on. Man's Hammer, yeah, this card's strategy for one of your opponents. Mainly, Lugia, Fable Fleet. I thought this card was kind of interesting. Someone that was actually good for control. Reveal the top card your opponent's bench. Your opponent's cards.
So you can only play this for any. Yeah, can you hear me? Oh, pretty close again. So maybe he has to play this card if anyone or not their opponent's last turn of the card deck and put three of them in shuffle cards bank. So ending lets you see a lot of cards, pick out what you need, but I do research for I don't know is just card this card a ton of play. Yeah. Yeah, Kieran, choose one. Switch your active one with one Pokemon, or different Pokemon three with your opponent's active Pokemon. I think that we use a lot of different decks. I think just reaching and do 30 extra damage is pretty cool. A number of tools just to buff or damage output. The 30 extra damage could work. And I think supporters in general that have conditions, if you don't get extra 30, the switch might be really, really important. I think that be used in, for example, Paladins. Switching is very important. You'll play a lot of switch cards, but also, if you don't happen to have the switch card in hand, you can use Kieran. And if you don't need the switch, you can use the buff and reach just that little bit extra. Palatine EX does 250, but with Kieran could hit 280, could get those V-star numbers. Um, yeah, no, I think Kieran is strictly a really good card.
Yeah, we have Lana's care coming up here next. Put up to 3 in any combination of Pokemon that don't have rule blocks and basic energy from your discard pile into your hand. So think of it like a super rod, but instead of going to the deck, it's going back to your hand. Pretty cool card. You might see a one of in some decks here and there, but otherwise, probably not going to see a ton of play. We also have Love Ball, a new item card. Search your deck for Pokemon with the same name as one of your opponent's Pokemon.
So bad.
Reveal it, put it in your hand. I mean, Greninja, right? Radiant Greninja, maybe.
But there's so many other ball cards. Like, I don't know why you would choose
Oh
to
yeah.
play this over Nest, over Ultra, over other balls. So I think it just that's a 1 cent binder card.
Yeah, no
Um,
doubt. Uh,
None of these are particularly interesting. Ogre's Mask, of course, is important. It's basically a what's it called? Thornton on an item, but only for the Ogre Pawn EX cards. Are there any other supporters here that are particularly interesting? No, I don't think. Look at the top five. Maybe discard. No, I don't think any of these are going to be played. But now we have finally the most important. We've got our ace specs for the rest of the decks. Scoop Up Cyclone. This is a card that is being reprinted. I think it's been in older formats. Put one of your Pokemon and all
Mhm.
attached cards into your hand. It's basically a Professor. No, what is it called? A What is the supporter card that allows you to pick up everything? Not Penny.
Professor Turo scenario. You're
Professor,
right.
yeah, Professor Toro scenario. It's basically Professor
Yep.
Toro scenario, but on an item card. I think it's really good. Charizard, plays two Thorntons right now. It could play this instead. Obviously, you're giving up the opportunity to play a whole bunch of other ace specs. So I don't necessarily know if it will be the ace spec of choice, but I think it is a powerful ace spec. Secret Box. I don't know if this is really necessarily a top tier card, but I think certain decks might play this just because being able to search for exactly the cards you need is good. You can use this card only if you discard three other cards from your hand, search your deck for an item card, a Pokemon tool card, a supporter card, and a stadium card, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So decks that really need to set up and need exactly certain cards, this could be the thing to play. You can search with an Arvin or whatever, but I think other ace specs might be more powerful.
This is a extremely controversial card. I've been listening to a few different podcasts, and no one can agree on whether this card is good or not. So, obviously, depending on the context, it's going to be good, it's going to be bad. We don't have a ton of time to get into it too much right now. Maybe this is something we revisit in the future. But, Will, good or bad card? Just give me a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you think?
Bad card.
Bad card. Okay, I think it's a good card, but we'll talk about that another time. I think, but it's not great. I don't think it's better than like a Maxim Bell or Prime Catcher or Heroes Cape, but I think it's okay. We're gonna talk about that card maybe a little more in depth another time. Survival Brace. Essentially, this is a I believe the old one was a focus band that was
Hmm.
not a spec. Basically, if it has full health and your Pokemon gets knocked out, that knockout does not happen. It has remaining 10. They have discard the card. Probably won't see a ton of play, but it might see something in like, I don't know, something gets knocked out really easily. Maybe if grass ever becomes a thing, Charizard might start playing that card. Unfair Stamp. I think this is actually going to be a very good card. You can use this very early, as soon as turn one if you wanted to. You can only play one. You can only play this card only if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck. You draw five. Your opponent draws two. Extreme Disruption. At any point during the game, you can play this in tandem with Roxanne if you wanted to be a jerk about it. I don't think it's going to see more play than like a Prime Catcher or anything like that. But I will say that this is probably now in the top five ace specs that we now have available to us. I think this is a very good card.
Yeah, I mean, disruption, especially at the end of the game, preventing your opponent from being able to do what they want to do, preventing them from getting that knockout at the end of the game, and also, of course, because it's an item card, you can boss in the same turn that you're unfair stamping. This just gives your deck a lot more utility. Um, Whether you play, this plus boss or prime catcher plus Iono or Roxanne, like using both in the same turn is possible for both decks. Relatively similar. I mean, I still think Prime Catcher is just a better card, but I think this is very close second or third. So a lot of people will be playing this. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
Boom.
Um, yeah, Boomerang NG. This is interesting, right? I might mistaken. This is actually a really good card. I'm not tripping, right?
I don't. I mean, it's interesting. I don't think there are just that many cards that or Pokemon that will actually be able to use this. But
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is Greninja.
yeah,
Obviously, both
Greninja.
Greninjas. Now that we're thinking about it, those
Yeah,
is able to use it.
that's about it that
Actually,
I
no,
can think
that's
of.
about it. Now that I think about it, but the thing is, so Radiant Greninja sees a ton of play in a bunch of different decks. So I can see this being slotted into, um, maybe even Lost Box. Just to give Greninja a little more utility there. That might see some play. Greninja EX. I can see you being able to hit that 120, bring this back onto that Pokemon, and be able to do it all over again. Might have some utility. Excuse me, some utility there. Maybe in JLC. I don't know. Maybe.
It's very specific if you have, if you just happen to have those
Yeah.
Pokemon that require discarding as a part of their energy costs, could be useful. But again, in GLC, you can only have a one of, so you just have to make sure you draw into it at the same time that you need it. It's niche. I think there are a few decks that might be able to use it, but otherwise, not that interesting. And finally, Legacy Energy. I think this card's going to be broken. I think it's going to make Lugia a top tier deck again. Um, as long as this card's attached to a Pokemon, it provides energy, every type of energy, which is always good. There's no, you know, um, caveat there, like the Neo Upper Energy, which has to be on stage two. This can be attached to anything, gives you Rainbow Energy to any Pokemon. And on top of that, once per game, if this Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, your opponent takes one less prize card, which is also, I think, just a broken ability. Of course, you can only use it once per game, but I think even once per game, that could really swing a prize trade and make you win. So
I think Ancient Box is gonna love this deck, or I love this card. I will admit, Awakening Drum does have its utility, but being able to just say, "Hey, you have to knock out 7 Pokemon now instead of 6," I think that's a big deal. As you already mentioned with Lugia, being able to add this to your Minchino or your Chinchino, whichever one it is, do a ton of damage, get knocked out, not have to. You don't really give up anything besides energy, and then be able to do that all over again. Really big deal. Maybe even in Lost Box to some degree. I don't know if it's going to see a ton of play there, but those are a bunch of smaller Pokemon. I don't know. Maybe Sableye. I don't think it's really going to be a huge play, but I do think Ancient Box is definitely going to use it. Lugia. Do you play this over Master Ball though? I don't know, man. That's a tough call.
100%. You play this over Master Ball because I think there are new cards that are going to allow you to set up better. Like I said, the supporter that
Mm,
allows you to discard on turn one. You're going to be able to set up just a little bit more regularly, especially with that supporter. And this opens up plays that you did not have before. You could not play Iron Hands in Lugia before, but
mm,
now you can accelerate this with Archeops. You can use Iron Hands. You can use you can't use your ninja. You can use Ogerpon EX. You can use other Pokemon that have attack costs that aren't just colorless. It reminds me of Lugia of old that had rainbow energies that allowed you to
mhm.
use like amazing rares and a bunch of other Pokemon. This will open up plays that people haven't considered before.
Really unfortunate you can't play Aspects in GLC. That's all I can tell you. But regardless, a very, very cool card. Going to see a ton of play. Um, Not in every deck, but the decks that do need it are definitely going to play it. I think Lugia is definitely one of those. Ancient Box might be one of those. There might be some other decks that we don't even know about yet that might be playing this card. So keep an eye out for that one. Pick up your Legacy Energy at the end of the month when the card comes out. That being said, we are way over time. Will, do you want to try to squeeze in a game of Blaine's quiz before we say
I
goodbye
I
here?
know I had one saved for today, but I think we can bring it next time. I think we've gone pretty
Sure.
long today. We'll maybe do a double entry of Blaine's quiz next time.
I like that. I like that. Well, with that being said, folks, we really do appreciate your time. Thank you for watching and listening wherever you may be in the world. We really, really do appreciate it. Will, any parting words before we say goodbye today?
No, I mean just get ready for sorry, not Mask of Change. What is it called?
Twilight
Twilight
Masquerade.
Masquerade. Look up your pre-releases. They are happening soon. I think May 11th, like 9th, 10th, 11th.
Yeah.
That's like less than 2 weeks from now. Keep an eye out. Sign up for pre-releases. Get ready because these cards are really, really exciting and they're gonna change up the meta a lot.
Yeah, I wasn't super excited about the set originally, but I do think it's actually going to be pretty impactful. The more and more we looked at, the more we talked about it. I'm actually pretty excited for the set. So, as Will said, check out your locals, go to those pre-releases, attend them, pull some good cards, sell them way too early. Just kidding, don't do that. That's a jerk move to make. But regardless, folks, we appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time here on the EXP Share podcast.
Bye.